Chapter 857. Lily felt a burst of anger and sneered, "When it comes to lying, who can be better than you? Mr. O Ming, I can't compare to your ability to make lies." "Is that so?" O Ming pressed harder against her, and the smile on his face widened. "So, you can tell which of my words is true and which is false." However, even though he had a smile on his face, his eyes were ice cold. It seemed that the next moment, he could crush her on the spot. Lily fearlessly looked at him, with a sneer on her lips, and slowly said, "Of course, don't underestimate the degree of my understanding of you." This time, even O Ming's eyes narrowed. He looked at her deeply, like a rippling lake, with layers of white moonlight, so deep, so thick. "Then let's do a test, how about it?" O Ming pressed against her, chuckling and touching the tip of her nose. Their breaths were intertwined, and it was impossible to distinguish each other. Lily stared into his eyes, and the moment her sight fell into his deep eyes, it seemed that the whole soul of the person was attracted to him. She had no power to fight back. What? Lily even stuttered. O Ming looked at her, just chuckling, but it was indescribably evil. Lily, O Ming raised his other hand, pinched her chin, squinted his eyes, and said in a low voice, "I still love you. I still love you." These words made Lily's pupils shrink, and her heart beat uncontrollably. It was so fast as if a small motor was installed, and even her body was shaking with it. O Ming's hand was placed across her chest, and he could clearly sense the subtle changes in her. His eyes slightly narrowed, O Ming slightly leaned his face forward, and kissed her lips. Lily's heart beat faster, and she couldn't believe it. Looking at the face in front of her that was getting bigger and bigger, she was stunned for a moment and didn't know what to do. O Ming closed his eyes and forced his way in. He skillfully pried open her pearly white teeth and quietly penetrated her. His movements were gentle, but Lily's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She flew to the past, to the past, to the time when he still loved her. "I still love you." Is that true? Unknowingly, a layer of water vapor had condensed in her eyes. When she blinked, the water droplets hidden in it suddenly fell down. His breathing became shorter and shorter. With a throbbing heart, she lowered her eyes to look at him. O Ming tasted the salty tears. He opened his eyes and looked into her confused eyes. "O Ming." Lily looked at him. The smile on O Ming's face widened, and he whispered in her ear, "Didn't you say that you understand me? So, are my words true or false?" In Lily's heart, there was a voice screaming crazily, "Really, really, really." However, rationality pulled her back to reality. How could that be? Didn't O Ming hate her so much? However, the pair of eyes in front of her were smiling and gentle, so real. The voice in her heart was about to come out, but it was like a fishbone stuck in her throat. If she said something wrong, would he say that she was overthinking, and then, she would be more humiliated? Lily looked at him and whispered, "Liar." Chapter 858. O Ming lowered his eyes and chuckled. With appreciation in his eyes, he said, "Smart girl." Lily's eyelashes fluttered. She looked up at him with a smile and asked in a low voice, "Is it interesting?" "O Ming, you don't want to let me go. Isn't it because you want to retaliate against me? Why don't you let me die of anger?" O Ming heard the words, gently lowered his forehead, and put it on her forehead. He said slowly, "Why should I let you go so easily?" His voice was gentle and pleasant. But it was with great sin. Lily could clearly feel the resentment in it. "So cruel, you know." O Ming's big hand gently moved down and whispered, "Your body is very attractive." His big hand wrapped around her waist and pulled her into his arms. Then, he lifted her up. Lily was shocked. She struggled out of habit but soon stopped moving and closed her eyes in resignation. With a low exclamation, Yu Lily was already lying on the bed. Oh Ming habitually put his knee on her lower abdomen, but soon, he thought of the matter of that year. Because of this action, which had become a habit, the two children turned into a puddle of blood. Oh Ming's heart was slightly tingling, and he quickly moved his knee away and fell between her legs. A pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes looked at her and said with a faint smile, "These things you bought are not cheap. Even if Su Qianxi gave them to you, you wouldn't accept them, would you?" Yu Lily listened and stared at him. Her red lips were slightly raised with sarcasm. "Look, how well he knows me. So what? To save you." Oh Ming's long fingers gently lifted her chin. "It doesn't matter who you sell it to. Sell it to me in the future." Then he lowered his head and kissed her lips hard. "The price I give is higher than anyone else." He had sacrificed his entire heart for this. Maybe it would be impossible to get it back in this life. Who would give a higher price than him? Ha ha. Yu Lily sneered and looked up at him. Oh Ming's eyes deepened, and he smiled evilly. He bent over and buried his face in her neck. Hot and passionate kisses fell on her body. Yu Lily's eyes trembled slightly. She felt the impulse of the man in front of her, and her heart was full of sadness. Gently closing her eyes, Yu Lily passively endured his roughness. The passionate kiss went deeper and deeper, teasing each other's senses. It had been a long time since he had touched her like this. For Oh Ming, it was undoubtedly a familiar stimulation. His body had already reacted. He panted and peeled off her clothes layer by layer. Unexpectedly, when he removed the last layer of her clothes, he suddenly realized that there was an even breathing sound coming from above his head. Oh Ming paused and looked up. Yu Lily's eyes were closed. From Oh Ming's angle, he could clearly see her long eyelashes. Yu Lily's breathing was steady, and her chest rose and fell. Just looking at it, it was a very fascinating picture. However, it made Oh Ming laugh angrily. This woman actually fell asleep. How big of a heart did she have? He pinched her chest twice as a punishment, but Yu Lily just waved her hand and frowned. Then, she tilted her head and continued to sleep. Chapter 859. After a low curse, Yu Lily still did not respond at all. Oh Ming was speechless. In the end, he turned and went into the bathroom. The bathroom door was gently closed, and Oh Ming also turned off the lights in the room. In a place where Oh Ming couldn't see, Yu Lily opened her eyes and looked at the darkness above her head. Tears quietly fell from the corner of her eyes. However, her heartbeat was fast. That sentence was true. Just as he knew her, she knew him. After Oh Ming took a shower and dried his hair, it was very late. He tiptoed back to the bedroom and unconsciously climbed onto the bed. There wasn't much self-consciousness involved in all of this, and everything was done naturally and smoothly. But after going to bed, he suddenly woke up. Damn, why am I so careful? For some reason, Oh Ming was depressed. After lying down, he pulled out the quilt that was under Yu Lily's body. Yu Lily moaned and turned over. Her even breathing could be heard. Oh Ming held his forehead and covered her with the quilt. Then he lay down and closed his eyes. However, his mind was full of thoughts, and Oh Ming couldn't calm down at all. Turning around, he reached out and gently hooked the little woman who had fallen asleep. Oh Ming's heart finally calmed down a little. But what he didn't expect was that Yu Lily took the opportunity to lean in his direction. Oh Ming's body was stiff. At the same time as he was stunned, Yu Lily had leaned over and gently rubbed against him to adjust a comfortable position. Then, there was a steady breathing sound. This was the habitual movement she used to have. She was like a kitten with sharp teeth and claws, snuggling comfortably in a warm nest after falling asleep. Oh Ming's heart beat fast, his body was stiff, and he didn't move. This woman really surprised me all the time. But, am I special? Was this unconscious movement in her sleep something that only happened to him? Or, does she do this to every man? Thinking of this, Oh Ming's heart was more like being scratched by a cat, itching unbearably. Oh Ming was not sleepy at all. He held the woman in his arms, and his thoughts had completely flown away. The night was silent. When Yu Lily woke up, there was no one beside her. The seat beside him was empty and cold. Yu Lily sat up. She was only wearing a thin shirt. Looking at the position beside her, she was slightly stunned. She clearly remembered that Oh Ming slept here. Could it be that she remembered wrongly? Last night, he seemed to have hugged her. Just like before, he hugged her to sleep. Just like before, she leaned toward him. It was a comfortable habit. But where was he now? Oh Ming had a habit of lazing in bed. Usually, when there was nothing to do, he wouldn't get up very early. He looked at the time. It was 8 in the morning. The landlady's daughter, Xiao Shui, looked at the tall and straight figure standing in room 403. She couldn't move her eyes away at all. His eyes lit up as he watched Oh Ming walk around and pack his things. He approached him and asked, "Mr. O, is you really not going to stay here anymore? Did she say she wanted to move? What a pity. If he lived here, this man might come here often." Although he was already taken, it was still worth it to be able to see such a man every day. Oh Ming nodded gently and said, "We're going back to Kingstown. We've troubled you during this time. Chapter 860. I see. Snowy was disappointed, but she quickly put on a smile and said, "Then I will ask my mother to settle the account for you." "There's no need for that." Oh Ming picked up the notebook that had been on the table for a long time. There was a clear outline of a face on it. Oh Ming's eyes darkened slightly. Looking at the lines, he said, "You should have signed a contract with you. The rest is the deposit, right? Since it was a breach of contract, you should keep all of it." While speaking, his eyes did not move away from the notebook. The strong and clear outline on the notebook, with only a few strokes, was very vivid. It was Oh Ming. At the bottom, there were 2 small and cute babies, with big round eyes, lying in the swaddling clothes. Looking through it, there were a lot of random drawings in the notebook. Some were intentional, and some were scribbled. At the same time, there were also a lot of words. "Life is worse than death. I can't stand it anymore." The black ink had solidified. Oh Ming looked at the words, and his eyebrows were full of complex feelings. So, after writing this, she committed suicide. Noticing Snowy's gaze, Oh Ming closed the notebook and put it in a small box. He said, "I can clean it up myself." "Thank you." Snowy blushed, nodded, and said, "Okay, then when you need me, you can find me. I am next door." "Okay, thank you." Oh Ming smiled politely, and soon Snowy went out. After Snowy left, Oh Ming picked up his phone and called Su Qianxi. Su Qianxi had just finished washing and picked up the phone when she saw the phone ringing. "Hello. Sister-in-law, this is Oh Ming." "I know, what's wrong?" "I'm outside right now. Go check on Yu Lily and take her to eat breakfast." "Well, okay." Su Qianxi responded and had put on her shoes. After a pause, she suddenly thought of the conversation with Yu Lily yesterday and called, "Oh Ming." "Yes. Do you know why she aborted the child?" Oh Ming heard the words, was silent for a moment, and then said, because it was my child. Because it was his child, so she did not want to keep it. Simple, rude, and hurtful reason. Su Qianxi heard that and chuckled. Li Xiqing walked out of the bathroom and heard her laughter. He looked over curiously and asked, "Who are you talking to?" "Oh Ming," Su Qianxi said to Li Xiqing. Then she smiled at Oh Ming and said, "Did Lily tell you that?" Oh Ming felt that her smile was a little ambiguous, so he nodded and asked, "What did she say to you?" "Hey, when are you coming back? I think it's better for you to say some things to Lily face to face, but you can't reject Lily based on your own understanding. Lily looks strong on the surface, but she's very sensitive. It must be because you're not good enough to her, so she's hiding it from you. If you don't ask, she'll definitely tell you." Chapter 861. Su Qianxi had never seen how bad Oh Ming's mouth could be. However, what Oh Ming said yesterday was enough to make her angry. In addition to Li Xiqing's words, Su Qianxi had already silently labeled Oh Ming as a bad mouth. Li Xiqing heard Su Qianxi's words and felt a little funny. Oh Ming's mouth was not bad, it was mean. Su Qianxi quickly hung up the phone. Seeing that Li Xiqing was still in his nightgown, she said, "I will go see Lily first. You can come to the dining room later." "Okay." Li Xiqing rubbed her hair, bowed his head and said, "Kiss me." Su Qianxi looked disdainful, turned her head away and ignored him. She picked up her bag and left. In front of you Lily's suite, Su Qianxi rang the doorbell. After a few seconds, Yu Lily opened the door. Her short hair was half wet, and she was wearing a bathrobe. When Su Qianxi saw her, she smiled and said, "Oh Ming asked me to take you to breakfast. Let's go." Yu Lily blinked and felt a little surprised. She asked, "Oh Ming asked you to come?" "Yes," Su Qianxi said as she got in. She looked around and said, "How did you sleep last night? Is the room good?" "Well." Yu Lily closed the door and said casually, "It's okay. I booked the room." Su Qianxi said with a proud look and whispered, "How about last night? Did you say anything to him?" "What can I say?" Yu Lily chuckled and looked down. "What are you thinking about?" She didn't say anything to him, but Oh Ming did say something to her. Some words that made her feel very hurt. Su Qianxi smiled ambiguously, raised her eyebrows at her, and said, "Didn't you?" Yu Lily saw her expression and reached out to push her face. She laughed and said, "Go away. I just got out of the hospital. What are you thinking about?" "Oh." Su Qianxi looked like she understood. "I see." Yu Lily saw the regret on her face and was speechless. She rolled her eyes and said, "Where did you learn that expression? You're so mean." Su Qianxi laughed and once again raised an eyebrow. "You learned it from the children's uncle Luo Zhan. It's really cheap, isn't it?" At the same time, Luo Zhan, who was far away in Kingstown, sneezed. The soybean milk and fried dough sticks in his mouth all sprayed out. On the other side, Luo Ran closed his eyes and gritted his teeth. The blue veins on his forehead bulged as he gnashed his teeth and roared, "Bastard." Luo Zhan shivered and immediately jumped back. He waved his hand and shouted, "I didn't mean it. Someone must be scolding me, it's impossible to guard against it." Luo Ran held the cup in front of him and was about to throw it over. Luo Zhan immediately covered his face with his hands, closed his eyes and shouted, "Big brother, you're a handsome man and don't hold grudges against me." "Humph." Luo Ran put down the cup and looked at the breakfast that had been ruined by Luo Zhan in front of him. He pushed it away and said angrily, "Clean it up. I'm leaving." "Where to?" "A date." After that, Luo Ran picked up a coat and opened the door to go out. Luo Zhan was disdainful. Seeing the mess, he couldn't bear to look at it and looked away. Chapter 862. He sighed in his heart, but soon accepted his fate and slowly cleaned up. Before he could finish packing, his phone rang. The name was Rollercoasters. Rollercoasters met Louis Han at a party organized by his colleagues last time. She had a great admiration for IT men who worked in the computer industry. Especially for Luo Zhan, the famous C, there was a kind of fanaticism that was almost like a brainless fan. From the day they met, she started a crazy pursuit of Luo Zhan. It was said that it was easy for a woman to pursue a man. Luo Zhan did not have much feelings for this girl, but he had been single for so many years. He was not in a hurry, but his family had been anxious. One by one, they urged him to find a girlfriend or a wife. Coincidentally, there was such a girl, so Luo Zhan reluctantly followed her. In a popular saying, it was above friendship, the kind of boyfriend and girlfriend who had not confirmed their relationship. Picking up the phone, Luo Zhan said while cleaning up, "Hello." Rollercoasters was a typical southern girl, speaking softly. Hearing Luo Zhan's words, she asked softly, "What are you doing?" "Cleaning the table." "I just had breakfast." When Rollercoasters heard this, she exclaimed in surprise and said, "You actually know how to cook." "That's amazing." "No, my brother bought it." Rollercoasters' voice paused, and soon she laughed and said, "It's also amazing to clean up. By the way, today is Saturday. Do you have any plans?" "No." For Luo Zhan, he could only eat, sleep, play games, and work. There was nothing else to do. Then, "Shall we go to the movies?" Rollercoasters' voice was shy and excited. She asked carefully, for fear of being refused. Luo Zhan clearly noticed her nervousness. He looked at the time and said, "It's too early to watch a movie. Why don't we go to the amusement park?" "Okay." Rollercoasters blurted out with excitement, but soon, her voice lowered and she said, "Don't you like to go to that kind of occasion?" "I don't like it very much," Luo Zhan said honestly. "But don't you girls like it very much? It's a rare weekend. Let's go together." Rollercoasters felt like her heart was covered with honey. She nodded and said, "Well, then. See you later." "All right." Luo Zhan hung up the phone. When he was about to take the dishes to the sink, he suddenly slipped and fell backward. Ping 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 lang, a clear and solemn voice sounded sorrowfully. Luo Zhan fell on his back and grimaced in pain. He got up and looked around. There was actually a small puddle of white soy milk at the place he had just stepped on. "Damn, Luo Ran is too much." Hiss. "Ah, it hurts." Looking at his elbow and body, Luo Zhan stood up to check. He took a deep breath and patted himself with grief and indignation. When he saw the debris on the ground, he suddenly felt terrible. When she lived with Louis Han, why didn't she have so much trouble? Sigh. After cleaning up, Luo Zhan lazily dragged his tired body into the room to change his clothes. Louis Han was playing golf with a client today. They arrived at the resort club early in the morning. As soon as they got out of the car, they saw a high-profile Maserati parked at the entrance of the club. This car model looks familiar. Glancing at the license plate number, he suddenly felt more familiar. A man wearing a knight's leather coat came out of the Maserati. He looked like a real person. Then he walked to the passenger seat, and a hot beauty got out. Chapter 863. As if feeling Louis Han's gaze, Luo Zhan quickly turned his head and looked at him. Louis Han raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at the girl next to him teasingly. Luo Zhan smiled slightly, looking quite pretentious, but as if he didn't know Louis Han, he quickly turned his head to look at the girl next to him, took her hand, and entered the club together. Louis Han looked at him pretending to be stupid and inexplicably felt suffocated. He laughed angrily, but quickly threw the key to the doorman, turned around, and walked in. The client arrived quickly. Louis Han ate with the client first before going to the golf course. However, coincidentally, when he was playing golf, Louis Han saw Luo Zhan again. Luo Zhan was standing behind the beauty, his arms around the beauty's body, and his hands were holding the beauty's hands. He didn't seem to be impatient with anything before. His eyes were gentle, and he was patiently teaching her how to play. He looked very skilled. But, when did Luo Zhan start to play golf? Lu. The client called him a few times, and Louis Han suddenly came back to his senses. He smiled and turned back to play with the client again, but he was not as focused as before. His eyes looked in the direction of Luo Zhan from time to time, and he seemed a little absent-minded. About half an hour later, the client was called away by a phone call. After Louis Han sent the client away, he was originally ready to take the car and leave, but when the doorman asked for the car, he stopped and walked back in. Luo Zhan and the girl were still in the golf course, but the actions of the beauty seemed to be much more skilled than before. Undoubtedly, Luo Zhan was a good teacher. But, when did Luo Zhan learn it? Looking at the skills, he didn't look like a novice at all. Just when Louis Han was about to go up and say hello, Luo Zhan suddenly hugged the girl, looking ambiguous and very close. It seemed that there was a chance. Tut. What happened to being a single dog? What happened to not flirting with girls? He didn't look like a novice at all. Louis Han suddenly felt a feeling of being cheated, and inexplicably uncomfortable, suddenly filled his heart. Looking at it, Louis Han finally didn't go up, but turned and walked out of the club again. Luo Zhan accompanied Rollercoasters to watch a movie. The movie was chosen by Rollercoasters. It was a romantic literary film that was very popular recently. But after watching for a while, Luo Zhan felt bored. Sitting in the seat drowsily, Rollercoasters next to him quickly noticed, gently pushed him, and Luo Zhan immediately woke up. However, to Rollercoasters' surprise, Luo Zhan's first sentence was, "I want to eat fish with pickled cabbage and chili today." But after saying it out loud, he suddenly realized that something was wrong with the surrounding atmosphere. Rollercoasters blushed and nodded. Okay. On the big screen in the cinema, the couple was hugging each other and crying their hearts out. Low sobbing sounds could be heard from the surroundings. Yora, who was in front of him, also had tears in her eyes, and she looked very pitiful. However, Luo Zhan suddenly had a feeling of displeasure in his heart. Baffled, she was filled with shame and anger. Chapter 864. Luo Zhan stopped and stood in the same place. Luo Zhan tried to pull him but failed. She turned back to look at Luo Zhan and asked, "What's wrong?" Luo Zhan shook his head gently and said, "No, I just suddenly remembered that there's something that hasn't been solved yet. Why don't you ask your best friend to have a meal together? Or, you can go back first. I need to go back to the company to take care of something." Rollercoasters felt a little disappointed when he heard that. But seeing Luo Zhan's expression, she nodded and said, "Well, then don't work too late. Remember to sleep early at night." Okay. Rollercoasters looked at him with some reluctance. With a light step, she came in front of Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan was a little surprised and looked at her in surprise. Rollercoasters' hands gently leaned on his shoulders, and the soft touch made Luo Zhan feel a little strange and magical. Rollercoasters blushed slightly, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed him gently on the lips. Luo Zhan was stunned in place, but Rollercoasters didn't dare to look back and just walked away. Looking at Rollercoasters sprinting back, guilt and self-blame surged like a tide. Rollercoasters was a good girl, but he didn't deserve her. He stood on the street in a daze. After a long while, he picked up his phone and called Louis Han. Louis Han was driving. He glanced at the car phone, saw the name displayed, and picked up the phone. Hello. Louis Han, are you free? What? Tell me if you're free first. Tell me what you want first. Let's eat together. Luo Zhan's voice sounded a little hopeless. Hearing this, Louis Han seemed to have guessed something. There was an 80% chance that he wanted to introduce his girlfriend to him. However, Louis Han still pretended to know nothing and said, "Oh, okay, then let's have dinner together." "Where are we going?" Luo Zhan thought for a moment and said, "Let's go to your house. I want to eat your fish with pickled cabbage and chili." "Damn, you can't do this, Luo Zhan. You still want to exploit me." Louis Han laughed angrily. "Do you want to present me with borrowed flowers?" Luo Zhan was silent for a moment. "Is this how you offer Buddha with borrowed flowers?" That didn't seem to be the case. However, he had never been good at understanding idioms. This. Louis Han was much better than him. It shouldn't be wrong, right? Luo Zhan thought about it, pretended that he knew everything, and said, "Sort of. Will you do it or not?" "Alright, I'll congratulate you. I'll go buy some groceries first. Wait for me." After that, Louis Han hung up the phone. Luo Zhan was a little confused. Congratulate him for what? Luo Zhan's car had been driven away by Luo Ran, so he basically had to take a taxi today. It was a bit far from Louis Han's place, so it took 40 minutes to get there. Louis Han had already bought all the ingredients. Luo Zhan entered the password skillfully, and Louis Han was busy in the kitchen. Clean and tidy. Louis Han's home did not look like a woman's home at all. Luo Zhan lay directly on Louis Han's sofa and slightly narrowed his eyes. Unknowingly, he had fallen asleep. In the dream, Roala tearfully accused him of being heartless and playing with her. At the same time, the scolding and disappointment of his parents and Luo Ran filled his ears. Chapter 865. Then, Louis Han reached out and pushed him, and Luo Zhan fell backward. His whole body jerked, and immediately, he opened his eyes. Louis Han was shocked by his sudden convulsion, and after seeing that he was fine, he breathed a sigh of relief. He patted Luo Zhan and said, "How can you fall asleep like this? How tired are you?" Luo Zhan took a breath and sat up from the sofa. Louis Han saw that he did not seem to be in a good state and said, Where is your girlfriend?" "Oh. I let her go back first." Louis Han was dumbfounded and said incredulously, "No way, I made so much delicious food. I just wanted to get to know your girlfriend. You actually let her go back. Why do I want to get to know her?" Luo Zhan sat up straight. "Maybe tomorrow she will not be my girlfriend. I don't think we are suitable. D***mn, weren't you too fine in the morning? You even hugged each other and played basketball. I thought you were going to get a room or something." Then, he seemed to have thought of something and said, "Could it be that you dumped her because she refused to be with you?" "Scumbag." Luo Zhan said. "When did I go to play basketball? Did you see it wrong?" "Damn, I don't know you. How could I see it wrong?" "You must have seen it wrong. I didn't play basketball today." Luo Zhan stood up and went directly to the bathroom. After coming out, he shouted, "I'm starving. Let's eat." Louis Han thought of this morning, when Luo Zhan pretended not to know him, and he pouted. After washing his hands, they went to the table together and Luo Zhan ate happily. Louis Han ate slowly and said, "Seriously, you can't play like this. Girls have to be pursued slowly. Who can stand it if you ask to get a room all at once? By the way, this girl should not be the same as the nightclub girl you had last time, right? Luo Zhan ate and listened with a confused face. Don't pretend to be stupid. I saw it, twice. I don't know how many times I didn't see it. Luihan, you must have. He saw it wrong. However, just when he was about to say it, Luo Zhan suddenly remembered. Luo Ran, where are you going? Date. Thinking of Luo Ran, Luo Zhan snorted, looked at Luihan, and said, I know, the person you saw was not me. How is that possible? I'll recognize you even if you turn into ashes. Do you really think I'm blind? Or do you have a twin brother? Luo Zhan was silent for a moment, then let out a long hiss, and said with some embarrassment, how should I say this? I didn't want to tell you, but since you asked, then I'll admit it. What? I do have a twin brother. He just came back from London some time ago. Luo Zhan snorted and said with a look of disbelief, then why have you never mentioned it before? Why should I mention it? It's not a big deal anyway. Luo Zhan didn't care at all. He took a sip of the pickled cabbage soup and said, he has his parents, and I have mine. We don't have many opportunities to see each other all year round. Even O Ming and Lao Er rarely see him, let alone you. Chapter 866. Luihan was worried that he would not be able to finish it. Unexpectedly, most of it went into Luo Zhan's mouth. He said he was here to eat, and he really came to eat. After Luo Zhan was full, he helped clean up the dishes and did not say a word. After cleaning up and washing the dishes, when Luo Zhan was ready to go back, his phone rang. It was Li Siqing. Lao Er. Come to Palace 1. Okay, but I have eaten. If you want to eat, you don't have to wait for me. Luo Zhan was a little sleepy after eating and yawned. Suddenly, the voice on the other side suddenly changed, and it was O Ming's voice. He said, you are familiar with Lu, right? Ask him to come with us. Why? Luo Zhan was a little puzzled. But soon, there was a flash of white light in his mind, and Luo Zhan immediately understood and asked, is it, the woman surnamed you back? Yes. All the causes and consequences had been connected, and Luo Zhan immediately knew what it meant. Glancing at Luihan, who was sitting on the side playing with his mobile phone, he said, oh, you can rest assured that Luihan does not like that woman. Luihan heard his name, turned his head and looked over, a little confused. However, O Ming did not explain much and said, just come over. After that, he had hung up the phone. Luo Zhan was a little helpless, looked at Luihan, and said what O Ming said. Well, anyway, I have nothing to do. Luihan stood up and said, I'm going to change clothes. At 1:00 in the afternoon, in the capital. O Ming came back with a lot of things from Yu Lily, all of which seemed to be more meaningful. After returning to the hotel, Yu Lily just came back after eating with Su Qinxi. Seeing the pile of things that belonged to her, Yu Lily was a little surprised and felt very close. She took the phone, turned it on, and went to play with other things. O Ming watched her quietly hide the notebook before looking at other things. His eyes were slightly deep, and he took the lead to say, let's go back to Kingstown today. Yu Lily heard that, slightly stunned, thinking that she had heard it wrong. She looked up and asked O Ming, what did you say? Go back to Kingstown and stay in the Shishan villa. O Ming sat on the sofa and slowly unbuttoned his cufflinks. You seem to be good at drawing. Why don't I arrange a job with comics for you? There was a comic website under O Group, which was mainly a charging channel for wireless clients. Yu Lily had already heard of the website's high potential. But to directly give him a position. Wasn't this the legendary backdoor entrant? Wait. How did he know that she was good at drawing? Yu Lily subconsciously looked at the notebook that she had secretly hidden. Here, after her diary disappeared, it replaced it and became a new diary. It had always been by her side. Oh Ming probably saw it. In addition to the text, there were also many illustrations. Many of them were human faces, and Oh Ming was undoubtedly the one with the highest appearance rate. And Louis Han, second. Oh Ming squinted at her and said, "You still like that, Louis Han?" Yu Lily didn't know what he meant by that. She looked at him anxiously. "What are you afraid of?" "I won't eat him. I don't really like him. In the past, I especially liked this type of boy, but now I don't like him anymore." "Is that so?" Oh Ming's voice was low, and the meaning was unclear. Chapter 867. When Oh Ming heard those 3 words, it was as if he had heard something funny. A pair of peach blossom eyes looked at her, and his smile deepened. He gently took off his coat, and his voice seemed to be careless. He said slowly, "If I understand it correctly, the so-called jealousy should be an irrational behavior of a person who is unhappy, angry, uneasy, or even angry when his lover faces another person of the opposite sex." Jealousy was jealousy. After being translated in this way, Yu Lily suddenly felt that the words suddenly became lofty. He continued, "And you, do you think that you are my lover?" Yu Lily was stunned when she heard what Oh Ming had said. Obviously, he was not. Yu Lily originally wanted him to shut up, but she did not expect such a reply, and suddenly became embarrassed. She thought that he would be the passive one. However, Oh Ming's rank was obviously much higher than he had imagined. Oh Ming's eyes looked at her and smiled, slightly raised his eyebrows, and slightly raised the corner of his mouth. "You are just my lover." After a pause, he added, "There can be many lovers, but there can only be one lover." Yu Lily's heart was suffocated, and she felt a sharp pain. Lover, lover. It seemed that there was only a difference of one word, but the difference was like heaven and earth. In order to get, the person who paid money was a lover. In order to get, the person who paid sincerity was a lover. Yu Lily never expected, but facing it like this, she still couldn't help but feel pain. What a knife. Oh, hee hee. Yu Lily looked at Oh Ming with an indifferent expression and shrugged. "I already knew it. It was just a joke." "But, you're so serious." "I'll think you're hiding it, Mr. O." Oh Ming's expression was obscure, and he said with a faint smile, "It's best to say it clearly, so that you can stop thinking about something that doesn't belong to you." Yu Lily's face was even more terrible. Oh Ming acted as if he didn't see it, looked around, and said, "Go pack up, and go back to Kingstown in the afternoon." While speaking, Oh Ming had already stood up and entered the bathroom. Yu Lily looked at Oh Ming's back, and her lips were pressed into a line, and her face was slightly pale. Looking at the notebook in her hand, Yu Lily sat on the bed and flipped through it. She had bought this book back when she was in Kingstown. Because it looked very beautiful, Yu Lily bought it without much thought. Occasionally, he would scribble on it. It was a very thick book. It was a beautiful steel plate with a thick hard paper cover. It was hard to tell how much paper was inside. On the last page, a name card was drawn. Dr. Jean Baihe was the chief physician of obstetrics and gynecology at the First Hospital of Kingstown. At the bottom of the business card, Yu Lily had clearly written a few words, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." Seeing these words, Yu Lily felt a lump in her throat, but then she closed the book and stuffed it into the box on the side. Oh Ming was in the bathroom, leaning against the glass cubicle with his phone in his hand. Looking at the business card taken on his mobile phone, Oh Ming thought for a long time before he opened WeChat and sent it to Su Qing. Editor, Yu Lily. Su Qing immediately understood and replied, "Okay, check it right away." Chapter 868. Yu Lily was a little surprised by Oh Ming's thoughtfulness. He actually found the things for her. There was a wonderful feeling in her heart, which was quickly fermenting. Looking at the familiar things, Yu Lily began to pack her luggage. Oh Ming walked slowly to the bed, picked up the computer on the side, and quickly typed on the keyboard. Yu Lily looked up at Oh Ming, and her movements became slower and slower. After thinking for a long time, she said, "Didn't you buy Lida's company? Can you help me find my things back?" Oh Ming glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. He turned his eyes back to the computer screen and said casually, "Didn't you say that you didn't use my computer? How did you know that I bought that company?" Yu Lily was slapped in the face, and her face became hot. It was rare that Oh Ming didn't take advantage of the situation. He looked at her red face and asked, "What things?" "The diary." Yu Lily looked at him and said hesitantly, "The blue diary is the one you read before, the diary that was taken away by Lida." Although she didn't know what they were going to do with it, that diary was very important to her. Thinking of the day that Oh Ming smashed the diary on her wall full of photos, Yu Lily had an indescribable pain in her heart. He didn't finish reading it. If he finished reading it, he would definitely not be like that. Oh Ming looked up at Yu Lily and said, "I found it." Yu Lily's eyes lit up. "Where?" "It's gone." Yu Lily was stunned and asked, "What do you mean by gone?" "I didn't find it. It was torn up by Lida's wife." Oh Ming's people left several times, and then Oh Ming let him see the technical loopholes of his company materialize and then be destroyed by Lida himself. In less than 3 days, the value and reputation of the whole company had plummeted. But no matter how much Lida begged for mercy and cried, he couldn't take out the diary. The life of this small company had come to an end. Hearing that, Yu Lily was disappointed, but at the same time, she expected it. Oh, Yu Lily lowered her head and continued to pack things. There was a brand new box in the room, which was just sent by the waiter. Yu Lily had bought quite a lot of things yesterday. When she packed them up, it was just enough to fill a box. While stuffing things into the bag, Yu Lily was still a little unwilling. She turned her head and asked, "That diary, where did you read it? Does it matter where I see it?" Oh Ming asked. Yu Lily pursed her lips, looked down, and shook her head. "It's not important. Anyway, it was already like this." Yu Lily's heart was slightly disappointed. She turned her head and continued to pack up. Oh Ming raised his eyebrows. It seemed that there was more to the diary than met the eye. What a pity. But when Oh Ming looked at Yu Lily, who was quietly packing her luggage, especially when he saw her folding her clothes, he felt inexplicably happy. In a place where Yu Lily couldn't see, he smiled slightly and lowered his eyes to continue his work. When they arrived in Connecticut, it was already 5 or 6 in the evening. Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi were about to go home but were stopped by Oh Ming. Chapter 869. Old friend. Yu Lily suddenly thought of Louis Han. Seeing Oh Ming's ambiguous eyes, Yu Lily felt a little repulsed. This guy, is he going to use Louis Han to deal with me? What does he want to do? While bullying me, he is also going to hurt Louis Han. Yu Lily felt that Oh Ming was despicable and shameless. When she met his intense gaze, Yu Lily pursed her lips and braced herself to say, "I don't have any old friends. You know that I don't have a good relationship with anyone in Kingstown. Are you very popular in the capital?" Oh Ming asked. Yu Lily was speechless, glanced at him, smiled, and did not answer. Oh Ming asked Li Xiqing to call Luo Zhan and then went to Palace 1. They got a private room together, eating and singing. After ordering, Su Qianxi dragged Yu Lily out to sing. After the food was served, Louis Han and Luo Zhan also arrived at the same time. While Li Xiqing and the others were eating, Louis Han and Luo Zhan began to sing while waiting for them to eat. Oh Ming was the first to eat. Elegantly and slowly wiping his mouth, Oh Ming walked to Louis Han calmly. Yu Lily saw his behavior and was inexplicably nervous. She stared at him, for fear that he would suddenly punch Louis Han. Oh Ming was also paying attention to Yu Lily at the same time. Naturally, he had seen all her reactions. With a cold smile, Oh Ming sat not far from Louis Han. He said, I heard that you have a project and are looking for investment. Louis Han heard the words and looked over, quite surprised. Yes, it's a mobile game. I know, I have heard about it. Your project is not bad. How about telling me the details? Louis Han did not expect that Oh Ming would be interested in the project of his small company. So, he specifically called him over to tell him about this project. However, O Group is such a big company. As the boss, Oh Ming must be very busy. How could he have time to pay attention to such a small person? Louis Han knew that there must be something wrong, but as a small and medium-sized company that had just started, Louis Han naturally would not miss any opportunity. What's more, if he could cooperate with O Group, then his reputation would definitely be great. Invisibly, his company would certainly enter the vision of various companies. In this way, his future development would certainly be much more convenient. Undoubtedly, if he could really climb up the tree of O Group, it would be beneficial for Louis Han. Immediately, she gave Oh Ming a detailed explanation. Luo Zhan was no longer singing, and their voices were clearly heard by everyone. Yu Lily's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly understood why Oh Ming suddenly called Louis Han today. This was a demonstration to her, and at the same time, a warning to her. For a company like Louis Han's, if Oh Ming didn't want it to exist, he could just say the word. Oh Ming had done Louis Han a favor on purpose in front of her. Naturally, he could destroy it at will. Yu Lily was not a fool. She put down her chopsticks and felt a little uneasy for the rest of the time. It was 2 hours later. Lu returned. Chapter 870. However, the furnishings and furniture in the villa had all been changed. The diamond-shaped sofa in ancient European style, the simple retro brown and yellow wallpaper, and the thick ancient European pattern carpet. Even the style and color of the interior lamps and chandeliers were different from before. It was strange. However, the villa was filled with the owner's wealth that exceeded that of ordinary people. Such decoration was too ordinary. If she didn't know that she had lived in this villa before, she would really think that she had walked into the lobby of a luxury hotel. It was not like Oh Ming's usual style. Yu Lily dragged her suitcase in and walked back to the master bedroom with ease. However, the mattress in the master bedroom had also been changed. The complex retro color, dark green and dark yellow intertwined, was strong ancient European style. Yu Lily hated this color, especially the color of the bed. Looking at it, she even lost the desire to sleep. Yu Lily heard footsteps behind her, and she turned to look. Oh Ming walked over slowly and said, "You go to the next room to sleep first." The indifferent command made Yu Lily feel like she had been trampled under the foot of the dog. Next door was a guest room. The opposite was the second bedroom. Oh Ming actually let me sleep in the guest room. Yu Lily looked at the master bedroom and asked, "Is this where you sleep?" Oh Ming should not like this kind of pattern. In his words, it was old-fashioned and vulgar. When Oh Ming heard that, he glanced at Yu Lily and said, "Anyway, it is not yours." Yu Lily immediately understood. Since Oh Ming said so, naturally, it could not be his own. So, there was someone else living here. Even the decoration of the living room and so on were done by that other person. But, who could it be? Oh Ming had a lot of houses under his name, but only the villa in Shishan was used by him to raise a woman. Yu Lily had stayed in this canary's cage for 3 years. In that case, the other person must be a woman. Don't tell me, it's that Miss Shin, that fiancé. Yu Lily looked at him with a sneer and said, your private life is really rich. Oh Ming glanced at her and chuckled. Why, are you jealous? Yu Lily smiled and looked at Oh Ming with a pair of beautiful big eyes. She asked, Oh Ming, what is our relationship? Oh Ming put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked over. His smile didn't diminish. He raised his eyebrows and said, didn't I tell you earlier? You are my lover. TSK, if I remember correctly, you just said today that this so-called jealousy is the irrational behavior of a person when their lover is facing another person of the opposite sex. Since they are in a relationship, why would I be jealous? Yu Lily's eyes were contemptuous, but her heart was stuffy and depressed. Lover, she still became his lover. Didn't we agree not to repeat the same mistakes? Why did everything change again unknowingly? She turned around and pulled her suitcase to the guest room next door. There was nothing in the empty room. Yu Lily's heart ached even more. How a man treated a woman could be seen from the details. Obviously, Oh Ming didn't plan for her and brought her back just like that. Chapter 871. In any case, Yu Lily couldn't resist the man's coercion. Resigned to her fate, she went to find the bed and put the quilt on it. The spare bedding was very clean, and it was obvious that someone always took care of it. This villa had not been empty in the past 4 years. Yu Lily was not very comfortable, but on second thought, it seemed that she was not qualified to interfere with how many lovers he had or whether he had a fiancé. She was just one of his lovers, that was all. Just after Yu Lily dragged the suitcase away, Oh Ming turned his head and took a deep look at the master bedroom, with the same unhappy look on his face. He picked up the phone and called the nanny, Nanny Zhou, who had already gotten off work. She quickly answered and shouted, Master O. Didn't I ask you to change all the things in the room? Why haven't you changed them? This. Nanny Zhou seemed to be a little nervous and said, Miss Shin didn't let me change them. A few days ago, the movers came, and Miss Shin directly drove them away. I can't help it, Master O. Oh Ming's face became more and more sullen, and he said, Who is she? She lived here for less than 2 months, and she made my place like this. In the face of Oh Ming's obvious anger, Nanny Zhou didn't dare to say a word. Oh Ming's tone was not good, and he shouted, Now, come here immediately, and change them. Yes, just after the phone was hung up, Oh Ming put the phone down and walked into the room. He walked into the cloakroom, which was full of beautiful women's clothes, and a few of Oh Ming's clothes. With a black face, Oh Ming clenched his teeth and fists, and he was furious. So dirty. He turned around and slammed the door. Just at the door of the room where Yu Lily was, Oh Ming's cell phone rang. Oh Ming was about to open the door, and after taking his hand back, he picked up the phone. It was Su Qing. Master O, I have found out about Dr. Jean Baihe. Oh Ming stood at the door, and soon turned away, and asked with a cold face, How is it? Dr. Jean retired last year, and now she is an honorary professor in a medical school, so I found her now. About 4 years ago, Miss Yu once saw the obstetrics and gynecology department in her hand. I found Dr. Jin's file at that time, and I have sent it to you. There is a document in WeChat. Okay, got it. With that, he hung up the phone. He opened WeChat, downloaded the file, and skimmed through it. This was Dr. Jin's casual note, and it had been saved into an electronic file. Yu Lily had seen Dr. Jean twice. The first time was to confirm her pregnancy, and the second time was to consult about the fetus. Due to the pregnant woman taking too many contraceptives, the possibility of the fetus being deformed or mentally retarded is higher. It is not recommended to keep the fetus. When Ming saw these words, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Malformed fetus. Retard. What does that mean? Ming zoomed in on the document for fear that he might have read it wrong. However, after reading it over and over again, Ming held his phone with mixed feelings. Due to taking too many birth control pills, the possibility of fetal malformation is very high. So, what did it mean? Did you Lily abort the child because of this reason? Lily is a good girl. There must be a reason why she aborted the child. No mother would abort her own child. Chapter 872. Really? What excuse did you come up with this time? A few days ago, just as you Lily was about to tell him the real reason, he had said that out loud. Because he didn't believe there was any other reason at all. Thinking of what he had said at that time, Ming wanted to punch himself. It turned out to be like this, it turned out to be like this. Ming's eyes twinkled as he stared at the words on the phone. Ming turned around and walked toward the room where Yu Lily was. When he opened the door, Ming had already walked into the guest room that he had just arranged for Yu Lily and found that she had already made the bed. Seeing him come in, Yu Lily just glanced at him and then continued to make the bed for herself. Ming's heart ached when he saw that. She was still like this. How could this be? Unknowingly, she had caused such a big change in his heart, but she didn't know it herself. How could this be? Ming stepped forward and grabbed her hand. Yu Lily was suddenly grabbed, and she was shocked. Looking at Ming in surprise, Yu Lily laughed and asked, "What are you doing?" But Ming didn't answer. He pulled her and then held her in his arms. Yu Lily was slightly shocked and surprised. "Yu Lily!" Ming suddenly shouted and held her with both hands. He was still holding the phone in his hand, and his voice was a little hollow. "Let me ask you, in the beginning. Why did you have an abortion?" Yu Lily didn't expect that Ming would suddenly think of this question. After a moment, her mind subconsciously thought of the two children. Her heart felt as if it had been grabbed by a big hand, and it was very uncomfortable. After a little struggle, Yu Lily's eyes became red, but she sneered and said, "You won't believe me even if I tell you. Let me go." Hearing this, Ming felt that he was simply wrong. How much sin did I have to commit to make my image in her heart fall to this? Yu Lily struggled, but Ming held her tightly. He put his head into her neck, held her tightly, and said, "Yu Lily, don't move." Yu Lily was a little uneasy and asked nervously, "What do you want to do?" Ming couldn't have done this for no reason. Ming was silent for a moment, then said, "Tell me, why did you kill the children?" "Why?" Yu Lily stopped struggling. Her eyes were hot and red, and her throat was choked. Ming's strength was very strong. He circled Yu Lily as if he wanted to embed her into his body. Yu Lily looked up and sneered. "Are you regretting it? You regret bringing a woman like me back to Kingstown, right? It's okay, I'll return your money to you. Let me go, I'll return it to you later." Ming's heart ached hysterically. It was that face again. Couldn't this woman try to tell him the truth for once? If Ming was still the Ming who didn't know the truth, he would have been enraged by her words. But now, all that was left in Ming's heart was heartache and self-blame. But at the same time, he was angry at her attitude. He laughed angrily, "Let you die. I won't die in the future." Yu Lily secretly breathed a sigh of relief. That's right. The Ming just now was too abnormal. Yu Lily continued, "I still owe a lot of debt, and I can only die after I pay it back. So, don't worry that you won't be able to collect your debt. It's just a matter of time. Dash. Chapter 873. I will work hard to make money and pay off all the debts I owe you first. As for the medical expenses, what if I don't give it to you? Oh Ming suddenly said, straightened up, and looked at her face. Oh Ming's expression was unspeakably serious. Looking at her, his beautiful peach blossom eyes were even more beautiful at this moment. You Lily, tell me the truth. Why did you abort the child? Oh Ming looked at her with a pair of serious and deep eyes, which made Yu Lily feel a little sad. She looked away and looked at the ground, saying, don't ask. You won't believe it. Maybe, you will think that I made up an excuse to deceive you. It has always been like this. Since they met 4 years later, he had a deep doubt about every word she said. He had long since lost all trust in her. What was the use of asking this reason now? He couldn't believe it at all, but when Oh Ming heard Yu Lily's words, he felt that his heart was hit by something hard, and the pain was heartbreaking. Because the doctor said that the child was very likely to be deformed, so you aborted the child, right? Oh Ming's hands squeezed her shoulders, and a pair of eyes stared at her, as if he wanted to see through her. Tell me honestly. Yu Lily heard the words and looked at him incredulously. When Oh Ming saw her expression, he already had the answer in his heart at that moment. It's true, yes, how can I believe such a reason? Could it be that the diary had something to do with this? The diary that Yu Lily has been concerned about should be about this reason, right? If Yu Lily told him herself, or if Oh Ming saw the contents of the diary, Oh Ming might not believe it completely. However, Su Cheng was his man, and the results he found would certainly not be false. It turned out that Yu Lily hid such a deep and big secret in her heart. Yu Lily's face, which had been calm, suddenly shed tears. Seeing Oh Ming's obviously very serious face, the little umbrella in her heart, which had been held for 4 years, collapsed in an instant after seeing his serious and compassionate expression. Yu Lily's breath was short, and then she broke down and cried. Oh Ming's heart felt as if it had been pierced by a steel needle. Blood spurted out, dripping beautifully. He pulled her into his arms and hugged her. His throat choked and his eyes were slightly hot. Holding her, he lowered his head and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep it from me? You Lily, you are too selfish." His voice was choked with sobs, and his big hand rubbed her short hair with more force. The pregnancy, the possible malformation, and the abortion, why didn't you tell me a single thing? Why did you wait for me to find out, for me to ask you, such a big secret? How did you Lily manage to deal with all these incidents one after another? Moreover, he had done so many outrageous things. He was simply worse than a beast. Chapter 874. Second brother's wife is pregnant, and it's twins. She shows off to me every day. When we have twins in the future, at least don't lose at the starting line. Oh Ming's words seemed to be ringing in her ears. His words were full of longing and hope. Until now, Yu Lily still remembered them clearly. Every time she thought about it, she felt that she had committed a heinous crime. Now, Oh Ming found out what was going on, which made Yu Lily feel even more guilty. She moved her hands up from his chest and wrapped them around his neck. She choked with guilt and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." Oh Ming's heart ached when he heard that. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "Promise me that if anything happens in the future, you must tell me, okay? Tell me, and we'll solve it together. Don't hide anything from me in the future, okay?" Only in this way could Oh Ming not make mistakes. Only in this way could Oh Ming be with her for a long time. He wanted to be with her. He really wanted to be with her. Yu Lily's crying gradually stopped. After a hard yawn, she wiped her tears with her sleeves. She gently pushed him away. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked up at Oh Ming. At that moment, Oh Ming's eyes were also red. He looked at her and put his palm on her cheek. He gently wiped away her tears and whispered, "Promise me, okay?" Yu Lily almost cried again. She wiped her tears and nodded. She wanted to say something, but she was already sobbing. Yu Lily nodded and didn't say a word. Oh Ming smiled and whispered, "Let's go. Don't live here. I'll take you to the apartment in Yanjing." "Why?" Yu Lily looked up at him and asked. Oh Ming looked at her and said, "It's more comfortable there." Yu Lily looked at him and didn't ask any more questions. She nodded. When they arrived, Yu Lily found that it was one of the new buildings opened by the Li Group in recent years. It was a prime location and expensive. It was a luxury apartment on the 28th floor. Yu Lily watched Oh Ming enter the password and walk in. When he opened the door, he clearly found something unusual. There were signs of people living everywhere. The living room was very clean, and there was a faint fragrance in the air. Oh Ming dragged her suitcase to the bedroom. Yu Lily walked in and found that the ironed suit and shirt were all neatly folded. Everything was very neat and orderly. Every corner had an unparalleled taste and comfort. There was no doubt that Oh Ming lived here. "I live here." Yu Lily stood at the door of the bedroom and looked at Oh Ming inside. "Isn't this your room?" "Yes, we'll live together." Oh Ming helped her open the box and took out the things inside one by one. "We'll live together in the future." Yu Lily's eyes were hot, and she looked at him. In the past, he and she had always lived in the villa in Shishan. Now that the villa in Shishan had changed a lot, he brought her here, living together. Then, what would be the relationship between them in the future? Or was it a lover? Was it the relationship between a kept woman and a kept woman? Yu Lily looked down. She wanted to ask, but she was afraid of thinking too much. She went forward and hung the rest of the clothes with Oh Ming. Yu Lily's movements were much faster than Oh Ming's. Obviously, Oh Ming had never done such a thing. Chapter 875. Unpleasant sexual experience, sexual behavior, sexual injury. Oh Ming subconsciously thought of the time in the bar in the capital, when he made her look bad in public. "Hey!" Oh Ming felt a headache and scratched his head. He was very annoyed. Is it because of that? After that incident, Yu Lily tried to commit suicide several times. Now, she is actually suffering from sexual apathy. Oh Ming felt that it was not an exaggeration to be cut into pieces. What should I do now? Sexual apathy could be a big or small thing. If every day was like today, Oh Ming knew that he would not be able to bear it. Turning off the computer, Oh Ming went to the bed and looked down at Yu Lily, who had fallen asleep. After lying down with some annoyance, he held her and closed his eyes. The next day, as soon as Yu Lily opened her eyes, she saw Oh Ming putting on his clothes. Oh Ming looked at her while fastening his cufflinks and said, "Let's go to the hospital today." Yu Lily looked at him with some doubts and asked, "What are we going to do?" "I suspect that you have sexual apathy, and you are too thin now. Go and get some tonic to take to nourish your body." While Oh Ming was talking, he had put on a suit. The burgundy suit had clear lines and a nice style. The familiar color made Yu Lily sit up and shake her head. "No, I'm just in a bad mood recently. It should be fine in a few days." Oh Ming glanced at her, not fully believing her. He looked at his watch and said, "Well, I have a shareholders meeting at 10 o'clock. I'll go first." Remember to eat breakfast. This way of getting along seemed to be the same as before. There was no change. Yu Lily felt warm and nodded. Okay. Oh Ming came over and kissed her gently on the face. Then he walked out. After Yu Lily washed up, she suddenly realized what Oh Ming's words meant. Sexual apathy. Sexual apathy. What? Yu Lily suddenly realized and thought of her state last night. It seemed a little, but wasn't sexual apathy something that only very old people would have? After washing up, Yu Lily went out and picked up her mobile phone to search on Baidu. After reading the introduction, Yu Lily felt a little inexplicable. Isn't it normal to be in a bad mood and not want to have sex? How could he suspect me of sexual apathy? However, this couldn't go on, she was too useless now. Could she only rely on Oh Ming for a lifetime? Yu Lily's computer had already been smashed. Now there was no computer around, so she had to take her mobile phone and find a job for herself. Suddenly, he saw a comic book advertisement. After he clicked on it, he saw a huge recruitment notice for a comic book artist. Yu Lily saw it and clicked on it. At a glance, she saw a variety of comics displayed inside. The style was so ugly. Cartoonist recruitment, a promising future. Yu Lily clicked on it and found that many comics were not as good as hers. Moreover, this website was also a new website. When Yu Lily clicked on it, she was surprised to find that it turned out to be a new site under the O Group. Could it be that the comic book job that Oh Ming said he would arrange for her was here? Yu Lily added the website editor's QQ, and it was quickly verified. Yu Lily, hello. Chapter 876. Cartoonist, these three words had absolutely nothing to do with her now. Yu Lily felt a little embarrassed and replied, I'm just interested in drawing, not a cartoonist. Well, we have a scriptwriter here, but we are short of cartoonists at present. Can you show me your drawing style? Yu Lily, okay. Yu Lily found the book she drew, took a picture of it and sent it to her. Great. What's your major? Yu Lily, computer. Haven't you learned painting? Yu Lily, no, I'm just interested in it. Great. I'll give you a script. You draw first, and I'll have a look. Yu Lily, is it an interview? No, I just want to see more of your drawing style. We now have a plan to train cartoonists. I think your drawing style is very beautiful and refined. You can give it a try. Our full-time cartoonists have a basic salary. Here is the welfare information. You can have a look. Yu Lily, okay. She clicked it, and it was the welfare plan of this new website. Full-time cartoonists had a guaranteed basic salary of 3,000 yuan, and there was a share of sales, which was 50% with the website. If they could reach the level of a star work or a blockbuster, the monthly income could be as high as 100,000 yuan. Yu Lily was stunned and couldn't believe it. After reading it, she swallowed silently and replied, what if they can't reach the level of a star work? Then you can only get a guaranteed basic salary of 3,000 yuan. 3,000 yuan. If she was asked to find a job, the salary might be higher, but Oh Ming would not let her find a job elsewhere. In this way, she could only work in O Group, and the salary she got would be much higher than that of ordinary people. At that time, she looked glorious on the surface, but those who flattered her on the surface actually looked down on her. Yu Lily knew it clearly. After thinking for a while, she decided to give it a try. Yu Lily, I see. Let me see your script. Document. Yu Lily took the document, opened it, and looked at it. He was immediately shocked by this plot. The plot was about a Chinese girl who returned to China as an exchange student. However, on the first day of school, she was hit by a boy's basketball. The boy apologized to the female protagonist, and the female protagonist was gentle and generous. After accepting the boy's apology, she became the talk of the town. It turned out that this boy was the school hunk. From then on, many girls started to find trouble with her. But later on, the boy tried all sorts of ways to protect the girl. In the end, he fell in love with the girl and confessed to the female lead. After that, the female lead was targeted by the campus belle, green tea bitch. After that, she was targeted in all sorts of ways, and they fought to the death in school. What the hell? Are all manga plots like this now? Lily's lips twitched, and she typed, will the plot of such a comic be popular? Sisai, this is an old trick, but tricks have always won people's hearts. Try drawing it first. Yuli, okay. Lily knew that her resistance was futile, but she had to try anyway. Lily picked up the pen and began to draw seriously. After about an hour, Lily drew a grid. Because there was no prototype, Lily drew Su Chinsi. After taking a picture and sending it to Sisai, Sisai quickly replied. Chapter 877. Ha! Lily laughed out loud. She didn't expect Su Chinsi to be so famous. Yuli, because there is no prototype, I drew her. Sisai, be careful that she asks you for copyright fees. Yuli, no, she is my friend. Sisai. Haha. Don't brag like that. Who is Su Chinsi? She is the boss of the Li Group, a strong woman in the business world. Is she a friend of this person? Sitting in the office, Yi Qianqian pouted. Seeing this reply, Lily knew that this person definitely didn't believe it. But this was the truth. Lily felt a little embarrassed, touched her nose, and also replied, haha, Sisai, don't use real people as prototypes. You should design your own characters. It doesn't matter. We can teach you. You can also make your own original cartoon. Yuli, original cartoon. Sisai, yes, it is your own idea, your own style, and your own story. In this way, the copyright fees will be very high. Yuli, okay, Sisai, you can use the digital tablet to draw. We will upload it directly to the internet. After the drawing is done, you can directly upload it. Yuli, okay, Sisai, your drawing style is very good, but you can't use real people as prototypes. Remember, even if you make a prototype, don't draw the face. It is too dangerous. Yuli, okay, Sisai, you can try it. If there is no problem, we can discuss the signing process of a full-time cartoonist. Lily was shocked and replied, so soon. Sisai, you have great potential. Come and try. I can teach you after signing the contract. Yuli, well, let me think about it first. I don't have a digital tablet yet. I have to buy one. By the way, how much is a digital tablet? Sisai, you can buy one for more than 1,000 yuan to practice. When you get the royalties, you can buy a better one. If you draw half to death, and the royalties are not as expensive as a digital tablet, how miserable it will be. It was only after Yi Qianqian sent the message that she realized she had said something wrong. She added, you can use one that costs more than 1,000 now. Yuli, okay, thank you. Lily thought about it and checked the digital board on Taobao. But, she didn't even have 1,000 now. Ugh, Lily was really destitute. She took the phone and fell on the bed. She flopped on the bed. What to do? Just when she was still distressed, her phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number from the imperial capital. Who was it? Yu Lily answered the phone. Hello. A woman's voice came from the other side. She sneered and asked, Are you Yu Lily? When Yu Lily heard his tone, she immediately became alarmed and asked, Who are you? My name is Enchanting, Oh Ming's fiancé. I heard that you came to my villa last night. I want to see you. I am at the Starbucks on the first floor of Hengyuan Square. I will wait for you for half an hour at most. Please be sure to come. The arrogant tone made Yu Lily sneer. She was a little disdainful. She rolled her eyes and said, Who do you think you are? What if I don't go? Chapter 878. Oh, is that so? Yu Lily raised her voice as if she was very interested and asked, What is it about? Ha! You'll know when you get there. I promise you won't be disappointed. Enchanting chuckled and looked like she was going to win. His tone and attitude made it clear that he was certain that Yu Lily would come. Oh. I see. Yu Lily nodded and looked serious. Well, wait a minute. I'll be there soon. Okay. Enchanting was very satisfied with Yu Lily's understanding and said, Oh Ming likes obedient women. No wonder he likes you so much. After that, she hung up the phone. Yu Lily looked at the phone and sneered, naive. After saying that, he blacklisted Enchanting's number. When did Oh Ming like obedient women? Yu Lily tilted her head and thought for a moment. She suddenly felt that Enchanting was a little sad. She shook her head and then continued to browse Taobao with her mobile phone. Enchanting sat in Starbucks for half an hour, but she didn't see anyone like Yu Lily. Enchanting furrowed her delicate eyebrows and felt a little displeased. She picked up the phone again and dialed Yu Lily's number, but it showed that she was not in the service area. What happened? No signal. Enchanting dialed again, but the result was still the same. At this time, even if Enchanting was stupid, she realized that Yu Lily had blacklisted her. Enchanting was furious. She angrily hit the table and gritted her teeth. Many people turned to look at Zhang Xian. Enchanting's face softened a little. She stood up and quickly walked out of the coffee shop. Yu Lily looked at the time and was in a good mood. She read comics on her mobile phone and quickly browsed the current popular comics rankings. She just read half of it, and soon there was another call from Mystery. It was also an unknown number, but the place of origin was Kingstown. Even if she thought with her knees, she knew who the caller was. Although Yu Lily was in a good mood, she didn't want to answer it at all. Yu Lily rejected the call and directly blacklisted it. On the other side, Enchanting was so angry that she gritted her teeth. This woman dared to play with me like this. B*TCH. She started the car and drove to Oh Ming's company. Oh Ming was busy in the office after the meeting. Suddenly, someone from the secretary's office came to inform him, Master Oh, Miss Shen is here. Hearing this, Oh Ming frowned and said, I'm busy. I won't see you. The secretary was a little embarrassed and continued, Miss Shen said that she has something very important to tell you. She seems to be a little angry. Why don't you see her? When Oh Ming heard that, he smiled coldly. He looked up at her and asked, Who are you working for? Hearing this, the secretary nodded and retreated, closing the door behind her. When he walked out, he saw Enchanting sitting in the living room, drinking the best coffee with her legs crossed. She was wearing a beige fur coat, her curly hair was tied up, and her exquisite makeup made her look charming and sexy. She was as beautiful as an Asian lady. However, such a woman had a bad temper. Chapter 879. Hearing Enchanting's question, the secretary couldn't answer and was a little embarrassed. Suddenly, she turned around and saw a figure. Feeling a great surprise, she shouted, "Special Assistant Sue." Su Ching came over here. Naturally, he had already heard what Enchanting had just said. Seeing Enchanting's obviously unhappy expression, he said calmly, "Master O has recently been following up an overseas investment case, which is worth up to 50 billion yuan. If Miss Shen has nothing to do, please don't disturb Master O easily." Enchanting listened with a face full of suspicion. She looked at Su Ching and asked, "Is what you said true? Is it an overseas investment case?" Su Ching nodded and said calmly, "Of course. Why would I lie to you?" Enchanting snorted coldly and uncrossed her legs. She then picked up her handbag and walked out of the room. Seeing Enchanting's movements, Su Ching looked at the secretary with a sullen face and said coldly, "Why don't you see Miss Shen off?" The secretary immediately followed and said, "Miss Shen, this way please." Seeing Su Cheng's attitude, Enchanting felt very uncomfortable and immediately changed her face. Turning around, Enchanting stared at Su Ching and said, "Special Assistant Su, you'd better pray that I don't find out that you are lying to me. Otherwise, I have plenty of ways to deal with you. Don't forget, I am your future wife." When Su Ching heard the words, he nodded slightly with a smile and said, "Of course not." Although he said so, there was no respect or fear on his face. "I'm just a worker. How can I deceive the future proprietress? Master O is really busy. If you don't believe it, Miss Shen can go in and have a look and question Master O face to face, lest he says that I don't respect the future wife of the president. I'm so wronged." Enchanting's voice paused and she was angry. "Go in and have a look. Confront O Ming face to face." How could it be possible? Who didn't know that O Ming had a bad temper and was impatient with everyone? Su Ching actually asked her to confront such a person. Wasn't it obvious that he was ridiculing her and laughing at her? Enchanting stared at Su Ching for a long time before she stamped her feet and turned to the elevator over there. Su Ching watched Enchanting walk away, and the expression on his face became more and more indifferent. With a cold face, he looked at the secretary who had just returned and said, "Are you new here?" The beautiful secretary shrank back a little and nodded. "Come in, let's have a meeting." As soon as Su Ching entered, all the people in the secretarial office stood up and shouted, "Hello, Mr. Su." Su Ching nodded and said, "Don't you know what kind of person is coming? Enchanting, don't send a newcomer next time. In short, it's not urgent. Master O is busy. If he can't handle it, he can come to me." The people in the secretarial office looked at each other, nodded, and said in unison, "Yes." Su Ching walked out and entered the president's office. After knocking twice on the door, Su Ching signaled that he was coming in. O Ming stopped what he was doing and looked at him with his arms crossed. "Just now, Miss Shen came. She didn't look like she came with good intentions, so I sent her away. I think she's going to inquire about Miss Yu next." When O Ming heard that, he chuckled and shook his head slowly. She might have already been found. Pay attention to that woman's movements. If anything goes wrong, report it to me immediately. Chapter 880. O Ming, who had intended to continue working, stopped and looked up at Su Ching. Su Ching's back was stiff, and for a moment, he was frozen in place. The atmosphere was awkward. O Ming looked at him for a few seconds and said slowly, "Enchanting." Su Ching got the answer and immediately understood. He nodded and said, "Got it, Master O. I don't need you to keep an eye on my own woman." O Ming lowered his head to work and said casually. Su Ching felt even more uncomfortable. He straightened his back and nodded. Okay, Master O, then I'll go first. Okay. O Ming did not look up. Su Qing immediately turned around and went out as if he had been pardoned. However, even before he went out of the door, he heard O Ming's voice coming from behind. Oh, yes. Su Qing froze on the spot like a wooden stick, not daring to move. O Ming continued, help me find a position in Eurasian comics. First, an editorial assistant. Give it to you. Su Qing nodded with his back to O Ming and said, okay, Master O. Go. Su Qing really did not dare to stay. He opened the door and immediately went out. After closing the door of the office, Su Qing came out and quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Facing the eyes from the secretary's office, Su Qing pretended to be calm and stepped out. But before he reached the elevator, his cell phone rang. It was O Ming. Su Qing's heart was immediately alarmed. He picked up the phone and immediately shouted, Master O. Okay. O Ming's voice came and said, don't make it too obvious. You think that she earned the position by herself. This is a small matter. Solve it as soon as possible. After that, O Ming directly hung up the phone. Without the slightest mercy, Su Qing stood in the same place. It was not until the elevator arrived that he reacted and sighed. Walking into the elevator, Su Qing made a phone call to Eurasian Comics. Lily was browsing the web, and suddenly a message popped up on her mobile phone. Eurasian Comics is recruiting. Recruiting. After Lily clicked on it, she quickly finished reading it. Eurasian Comics is recruiting. They were recruiting editors, and their main job was to solicit contributions from cartoonists. They were equivalent to the agents of celebrities. The salary was very impressive. Lily looked at the salary introduction on it and felt excited. But without a computer, in such a large apartment, there should be a room similar to a study, right? She exhaled and walked out of the room. After walking around, he realized that this apartment was really not just big. There were 4 or 5 empty guest rooms. There was also a gym and a small izakaya. It took Lily more than 10 minutes to find the study. In the study, there were all kinds of certificates of honor and all kinds of treasures. There was a limited edition sports car model, antiques that were obviously old, calligraphy and paintings. There were shelves on all 4 walls of the study. On the wall facing the door, there was a large display cabinet, and on the left and right were bookshelves. The bookshelves were crammed with 2 walls full of books. Famous works, ancient and modern, Chinese and foreign, as well as rows and rows of handwritten notes. It was the first time that Lily had seen such a spectacular scene. It turned out that O Ming was a person who liked to collect books. I really couldn't see it. Lily picked up a book full of German and flipped through 2 pages. There were rows of notes on it. Chapter 881. O Ming's handwriting was beautiful, vigorous, and powerful. Among these 2 pages full of German, O Ming's Chinese was particularly outstanding. Lily's eyes were full of infatuation and admiration. Although she couldn't understand what was written on it, she still turned a few more pages and looked at O Ming's notes. After he finished reading, he put the book back and casually picked up another one. This time, she finally understood some of it, because it was in Japanese. Lily shook her head and thought of the time when they lived together in Shishan. But O Ming was not often in the Shishan villa. Thinking about it, he either went to another woman's place or came back to this apartment. It was good to come back here. The environment here was so good. Although it was only an apartment, the environment and decoration here were much better than the Shishan villa. Especially compared with the current Shishan villa, no wonder O Ming said it was more comfortable here. It was more than comfortable. Even the mood was very different. In the middle of the study, in front of the high display table, there was a large white desk. In the middle of the desk, there was a computer with a large screen. Next to the computer were thick notebooks and various file racks. Lily glanced at the computer and was not in a hurry to turn it on. Instead, she called Ming first. Ming was busy. He glanced at his cell phone and saw the words, Lily, and his mood suddenly improved. He picked up the phone and turned on the speaker. Lily's voice quickly came over and said, "Hello." "Yeah." Ming, can I use your computer? I am in your study now. Ming heard that, chuckled, and slightly teased, "You actually know how to say hello. Go ahead, there is no password." He seems to be in a good mood. Hearing this smiling voice, even Lily's mood improved. She nodded and said, "Okay. Then I will hang up. Well, if you are bored at home, you can go out for a walk. There is a card in the drawer of the study. It is the same password. There is a card in the drawer of the study. Is this specially left for me?" Lily was in a better mood and nodded. "Okay, bye." Ming let go of the phone. After Lily hung up the phone, he looked at the documents on the table, and his mood became better. The corners of his lips rose unconsciously, and just as he lowered his head, his phone rang again. It was Special Assistant Sue. He picked up the phone and spoke first, "Special Assistant Sue." Sue Cheng's whole body quivered. Ming actually spoke first. "Oh my God, so scary. Young Master I have arranged everything. Everything is ready now, and we are just waiting for Miss Yu to submit her resume." "Submit a resume?" Ming's voice rose slightly, and his tone was a little strange. "Submit what resume?" Su Ching coughed lightly and said awkwardly, didn't you say to make Miss Yu feel like she earned it herself, She briefly explained the arrangements to Ming. Ming raised his eyebrows slightly, nodded, and said, "It sounds good, but does it have to be so complicated?" Su Ching, forget it. What's done is done. Let's beat them at their own game. Su Ching. Yes. After Lily hung up the phone, the corners of her mouth rose unconsciously. She turned on the computer and opened the drawer while the computer was on. Chapter 882. It was the one she used before, and the card number was exactly the same. Lily picked up the card and looked at it. On the handwriting column of the card, the words, "OU," were clearly written in elegant handwriting. Ming, Lily. So it was OU. This was written by herself before, and it was still there. Did Ming keep it all the time? The computer rang, and it turned on much faster than she thought. After opening the social media tool, Lily sent the website on the phone to the computer, then opened Word and began to edit the resume. Lily majored in computer science at university, but she dropped out before graduating and went to Yunnan. Later, she wandered in Yunnan without success, so she went to the capital. Who would have thought that he would end up back in Kingstown? After thinking about it, Lily simply wrote a self-introduction and a mental monologue. After checking it again and again, she sent it over. Su Cheng was still thinking that Lily would look down on the small salary, so she didn't even want to send her resume now. In case she couldn't complete the task of Ming, then she would definitely be punished. But just as he was worrying about it, his phone suddenly rang. Someone sent a resume. This recruitment announcement was only open for an hour. After Lily clicked on the push, it only lasted for 10 minutes, and then the advertisement window was closed. Because it was an internal unspoken rule, Su Ching directly left his email address. He received 4 or 5 emails in succession, but none of them were from Lily. Just when Su Ching almost gave up and planned to find another way, he received an email. This sender name was definitely special to Su Ching. Yu Lily's resume. After a cursory glance, Su Ching saw the resume and surprisingly had a good impression of it. The words were appropriate and full of sincerity. But it was too honest, and she actually wrote all her education and experience. However, this Yu Lily had far exceeded Su Cheng's expectations. Originally, he thought that a woman like Yu Lily should be just a vase, but the literary talent of her resume was very different from what he had thought. After thinking about the words, Su Ching quickly replied to the document. What he meant was that he thought Yu Lily was very suitable and hoped that she could come for an interview at 10:00 the next morning. He also briefly talked about the salary and job description. After confirming that there were no problems, Su Ching sent it out. As soon as he sent it out, he heaved a sigh of relief. What a joke! The lady opposite him was very likely to be the future boss's wife. After being entangled with the big boss for so many years, Oh Ming still couldn't forget her. Compared to her, what was that mission? The reply from Eurasian Comics was much faster than Yu Lily had imagined. Yu Lily opened the email expectantly and was so happy that she almost jumped up. He actually let her go for an interview. This is great. Full of excitement, Yu Lily stood up from the chair and skipped back into the room. What should I wear for the interview tomorrow? The interviewee was only an editor's assistant. The salary during the probation period was only $3,000. The salary after becoming a regular employee was not announced, but it would definitely not be much higher. In this line, unless one became a regular editor, they could rely on commissions to make a living. Otherwise, they would only have a fixed salary. However, when Yu Lily opened the wardrobe, she found that all the clothes were branded. Chapter 883. With Yu Lily's current identity, would it be too exaggerated to wear famous brands to the interview? However, she didn't bring the clothes she used to wear in the capital. Yu Lily was a little worried. She took out a dress that looked a little more low-key and compared it with her body. It seemed that it was not low-key. Clothes make the man. This sentence was true. A better brand would give off a completely different feeling on the body. But now Yu Lily didn't want people to know the relationship between her and Oh Ming. It happened that this Eurasian Comics was also under the banner of O Group. If it was found that she lived with Oh Ming, I'm afraid there would be a lot of gossip. Yu Lily thought about it and went to Oh Ming's study to pick up the black card. After changing clothes and going out, Yu Lily went to a nearby ATM to withdraw 1,000 yuan. Wearing famous brands and a simple and beautiful bag, she walked to the famous affordable pedestrian street in the city. She spent 200 yuan to buy 2 sets of skirts and cheap trousers. Then she went to a store that looked good and spent more than 300 yuan to buy a coat. Well, it was beautiful. Yu Lily put away the clothes and sent them to the dry cleaning shop. Then she went to the pedestrian street to buy a bag of more than 100 yuan. In this way, there was only more than 200 yuan left of the 1,000 yuan she withdrew. More than 200 yuan was far from enough to buy a digital tablet. Yu Lily went to the second-hand market and bought a second-hand one, which cost a total of 130 yuan. After shopping, it was already past 4:00 in the afternoon. Yu Lily didn't have lunch at noon, so her stomach was growling. She picked up her mobile phone and called Oh Ming. Oh Ming was leaning on the chair to take a nap. When he heard the phone ring, he glanced at it casually and saw it was Yu Lily, so he picked it up. Yu Lily sounded very good and asked, "What do you want to eat?" "I'll go to buy vegetables." Oh Ming didn't have a housekeeper, so he usually didn't go out to eat. That was not good. Yu Lily had been a housekeeper for Oh Ming for a period of time, so cooking was not a problem at all. When Ming heard Yu Lily's words, his lips were slightly raised, and he looked very happy. He thought about it and said, "I'll eat whatever you cook." "Well, then you can't be picky later." Yu Lily's voice was with a warning, but she was full of smiles. He was in a good mood. Ming could see that. After stretching, he continued to work. Yu Lily didn't know if there was a vegetable market nearby, but there was a fresh food supermarket downstairs. Ming had always loved her cooking, especially eggplant and braised pork ribs. Yu Lily was a great cook. After buying a few ingredients, Yu Lily returned to the apartment. Yu Lily opened the password key, blinked, and pressed a series of numbers. It was her birthday. "The password is wrong." Yu Lily was a little disappointed and pressed Ming's birthday. When the door opened, Yu Lily breathed a sigh of relief. After entering, she used the rice she had just bought to make fish head tofu soup, eggplant with garlic sauce, and braised pork ribs. It was a very simple home-cooked dish, but Yu Lily was very happy to make it. When Ming returned, Yu Lily had just unpacked the food. Hearing the commotion outside, she ran out wearing an apron and shouted, "You're back, it's time to eat." Chapter 884. Ming's eyes were particularly soft that day. He stood tall and straight as he walked towards the dining room. After washing his hands, he sat down. Yu Lily filled his bowl with rice and brought all the dishes out. "There are only 2 of us, so we don't have to cook so much. But I haven't cooked for a long time, so I don't know how it tastes. You can try it." Ming took the chopstick she handed over, lowered his eyes, and ate a mouthful of rice, then picked up a piece of pork ribs. Familiar taste, Ming's heart was suddenly overflowing with warmth. He looked at Yu Lily with the same warmth in his eyes. Yu Lily was a little scared by his gaze. She twisted uncomfortably and said, "You, just eat. Why are you looking at me? It's better than before." Ming looked at her and chuckled. "It's delicious." Yu Lily was even happier. She gave him a bowl of soup, put it in front of him, and said, "You often work with your eyes. Nourish them. You're in such a good mood." Ming took it and scooped a spoonful. "Yes." Yu Lily put down the chopsticks and said excitedly, "You know, I found a job. I sent my resume online today, and they asked me to go for an interview tomorrow." "What a coincidence. You just told me a few days ago that you would arrange a job for me, and today I found one." As she spoke, Yu Lily felt something was wrong. She looked up at Ming and asked, "Did you arrange it?" Ming curled his lips and said innocently, "I just came back from the capital, and I was so busy. How could I do such a small thing?" "You think too much." "Really?" Yu Lily was a little suspicious. She looked at him and nodded, reluctantly believing him. "Speaking of which, this company seems to have something to do with your company." "Oh, really?" Ming pretended to be surprised and asked, "What company is it?" "I won't tell you. I'll tell you after my interview." Yu Lily took a sip of soup and felt a little proud. "My cooking has improved again. It's delicious." Ming laughed and nodded. "It's really good. What job are you going to interview for tomorrow?" "I won't tell you. I said I'll tell you later." Yu Lily scooped a bowl of rice for herself and took a bite. Suddenly, she thought of something and warned, "Don't investigate. All right, as long as you want to do something bad, I can let you do it." Yu Lily looked at him with a sly smile and asked, "What do you mean by bad things?" "Recreational clubs and the like. You're not allowed to sell alcohol or other scams or prostitutes." Selling meat, did he still think that she had sold herself for a living for the past 4 years? There was clearly nothing there. Hearing that, Lily's expression changed slightly, and she looked at him. Ming immediately sensed that something was wrong with Lily. He cursed in his heart. After putting down the bowl of soup, he earnestly said, "I'm not suspecting you. I'm just making an analogy." Lily lowered her eyes slightly, and her tone was no longer as light as before. She said in a low voice, "Ming, do you really think that I have been living by selling myself in the past few years?" All of a sudden, Ming was speechless. Chapter 885. On second thought, if Lily was really willing to live on that, then she would not live so miserably, right? With Lily's beauty, it was easy to get along in that kind of place. The premise was that as long as she was willing, Ming knew the value of this woman better than anyone, so he naturally had doubts. Now that he was relieved, seeing Lily's expression, Ming felt even more guilty. Every single humiliating sentence he had uttered a few days ago was enough to make her feel wrong to the point of death. What a great injustice! When Ming was about to speak, Lily's eyes were already red. She looked up at Ming and bit her lower lip. There was a little bit of tears in her eyes, which looked beautiful and dreamy. "If I tell you that I didn't, will you believe me?" Lily looked at him, sniffed, and her throat was slightly choked. With a little bit of crying, she said, "In the past 4 years, I almost couldn't live many times. I was very poor. When I arrived in the capital, I was cheated of all my money. All the money you gave me before was cheated. When I was the poorest, I slept in the pedestrian tunnel, went to be a thief, cheated people, and even wore a beautiful dress to beg on the roadside." Ming's heart was stuffy. Looking at her, Ming's peach blossom eyes were full of pity and heartache. He didn't know any of these things. In his world, Lily was missing for 4 years. Similarly, in the 4 years when Lily was missing, Ming did not appear. He never knew that she had lived so miserably. It was worse than he had imagined. No wonder, she couldn't live. Lily, there was a man behind me. He saw me on the roadside and thought I was very beautiful. He introduced me to work as a waitress in the nightclub, Lily said, but she stopped crying and sneered. Ming was caught off guard by this sneer, and his heart tightened. Lily looked at Ming and said seriously, "In the past 4 years, if I had such a thought, I wouldn't have lived so miserably. Do you know why?" Lily's eyes were like the best obsidian, bright and smooth, beautiful and without a trace of impurities. It was as if there was a mirror inside, and Ming's reflection was clearly reflected in it. Subconsciously, he asked, "Why?" She smiled brightly and looked at Ming. There was not a trace of impurity in her eyes. Her smile was bright and beautiful. She said, "Because there is a man in my heart. Except for that man, I don't want anyone else." It contained a man. Ming looked at her, and his breathing became erratic. His first reaction was to take her as his own. This man, is he himself? After all, he was her only man, but wasn't the man in her heart the one with the surname Liu? Could it be that the one with the surname Liu had slept with her? He looked at her and asked, "Who is that person?" Lily felt a little hurt. She summoned up the courage to confess, but she didn't know who that person was. However, looking at his obviously moved expression, Lily inexplicably felt that he was a little cute. She said, "That person is very bad. When I was still underage, he began to raise me. After he used gentle attacks to make me fall, he turned into a big bad wolf and ate me. I thought I hated that person because he was overbearing and exclusive, just like the landlord in the past, but, dash." Chapter 886. But, Lily was halfway through her sentence when she suddenly stopped. Hearing Yu Lily's words, Oh Ming felt a little itchy and couldn't help asking, but what? But I found that after living together for a long time, there are feelings. I thought I hated you, but in fact, when I was in the most difficult and desperate time, the first person I thought of was you. After I left Kingstown, I stayed in Yunnan for 3 months. In Lijiang in Yunnan, there is an activity, which is to close your eyes and write the name of the person most important to you. I wrote your name. She always thought that the person she liked and wanted was Louis Han. But until she left and walked alone on the country road in Yunnan, she found the most real feelings in her heart. In the first month when she left Oh Ming, she missed him, and missed him. She missed him crazily and wanted to go back. But at that time, Yu Lily did not dare to go back. She knew that she could not go back. Not only the death of the 2 children, but also the death of Li Xiqing was enough to make Oh Ming hate her. Yu Lily was not afraid of death, but she was afraid that when she went back, she would face Oh Ming's hatred and hysteria. She could not bear that feeling. That feeling was worse than death. It was not until later that Yu Lily realized that she only liked Louis Han when she was young that she couldn't get him. She also envied Su Qianxi and longed for Louis Han's love. Or rather, it was more of an obsession. An obsession that could not be achieved, but was not willing to let go. Knowing the answer in the deepest part of her heart, Yu Lily's obsession with Louis Han had slowly dissipated, no longer the same as before. Yu Lily looked at him with a smile and clearly saw Oh Ming's dark brown eyes, which were full of emotion and disbelief. Looking at such a beautiful smile in front of him, he suddenly felt his heart beat fast. Oh Ming's heart jumped uncontrollably. His heart was beating wildly, and he was overjoyed. Oh Ming had never felt so happy before, and in an instant, he was surrounded by it. What is Yu Lily saying? Is she just confessing to me? Oh Ming had never heard of such a confession. From the beginning to the end, there was no word about love, nor was there any word about liking. Yet, it was able to make him feel the feeling of liking and the existence of love invisibly. At this moment, Oh Ming had completely forgotten to react. There was only one thought in his mind: she cares about me, and I like her. Oh Ming did not know whether he was happy or unhappy. He looked like he was in a daze. If it were 4 years ago, Oh Ming would be so excited that he would hold her and run around. Now, after all, 4 years had passed, and everything had changed. Chapter 887. In fact, what Yu Lily wanted to hear most was the word Oh Ming's girlfriend. When it came to Yu Lily, she no longer felt dirty in her heart. Instead, it was a simple, mutual love relationship. Just like an ordinary boyfriend and girlfriend, they were naturally close and together. When Yu Lily spoke, her head was getting lower and lower. Yu Lily. Oh Ming's voice suddenly sounded from behind, which startled Yu Lily. She suddenly straightened up, looked up, and turned her head. Oh Ming was on top of her head, looking at her with a pair of eyes. That pair of eyes was like a dense forest in the moonlight. The wind blew, and the waves were endless, undulating, but it was so beautiful that it made people intoxicated. Yu Lily looked at him, and then, Oh Ming suddenly lowered his head, and kissed her lips. Without any defense, Yu Lily looked at him with her eyes open, and her eyes gently blinked. From Yu Lily's angle, she could clearly see the deep smile in Oh Ming's eyes. It was like a little firefly flying through the forest, dreamy and beautiful. With a smile, Oh Ming gently lifted her head and deepened the kiss. Yu Lily closed her eyes and obediently responded. Oh Ming's heart was full of waves. It was like a small boat in the vast sea, pushed left and right, and finally returned to its own shore. Excited and moved. Oh Ming's arms from her front, holding the back of her head, gently, as if carefully protecting the most beautiful treasure. This kiss had nothing to do with lust. But it was the most comfortable moment for Oh Ming in the past 4 years. After a long time, Oh Ming gently released her. They gasped for breath and looked at each other. Yu Lily's neck was a little sore, so she lowered her head and gently twisted her neck. Oh Ming's eyes were deeper, and his lips were slightly raised. He whispered, "What you said just now, were they all serious?" Hearing that, Yu Lily looked up at him, and her lips were also gently raised. She stood up, put her hands through his arms, around his waist, looked up at him, and said, "Can I?" "No." Oh Ming put his hands on her upper body, and his lips were slightly raised. When Yu Lily heard those words, she was a little unhappy. She lowered her head and was about to say something, but Oh Ming kissed her lips. Oh Ming's movements were a little wild, and he didn't give her any space to escape. He pressed her down and kissed her. Yu Lily passively endured it. She leaned her head back and breathed heavily. He looked a little excited and said, "I don't need a nanny. I need you." Yu Lily was still panting, looking at him with astonishment in her eyes. "From now on, you will live here and fulfill your responsibilities as a girlfriend." Oh Ming looked at her with a wicked smile, and his eyes seemed to melt Yu Lily. Yu Lily's heart was beating faster. She looked at him and stammered, "What is the duty of a girlfriend?" "Eat together, sleep together, wake up together, play together, laugh together." Oh Ming's eyes became darker and darker. He looked at her like a mysterious black hole that wanted to suck her in. Oh Ming continued, "When the time is right, we will have children together, live together, and grow old together." His words were better than thousands of confessions. Chapter 888. Oh Ming saw her tears, smiled, and his eyes were full of pity. He lowered his head and kissed her tears gently, saying, "I'm serious, Yu Lily. 4 years ago, I also had such a plan. I even prepared a wedding dress, a wedding, a ring, and a venue, just for one day. When you told me that you were pregnant, I would propose to you and let you marry me, be my wife, and be the mistress of my family." However, when she successfully became pregnant, the answer she gave him was different. Yu Lily didn't know that in the past 4 years, he had loved her as much as he hated her during this time. When Oh Ming said this, there was no other emotion in his eyes. His eyes were as deep as the sea, and his tenderness was boundless. Yu Lily subconsciously thought of the design drawing she had accidentally seen in his studio long time ago, as well as the site plan. Could it be that those were prepared for her? From 4 years ago, Oh Ming had already prepared everything for her. Is this for real? Yu Lily couldn't believe it. She looked at him and asked, "What about your fiancé?" Oh Ming's face darkened. He looked at her with some displeasure and whispered, "Did she look for you?" There was no denial, so it was true. That Enchanting was really his fiancé. When she left, she knew about Miss Shin's existence. In the past 4 years, Enchanting has been by his side, right? Yu Lily felt a little uncomfortable. But she also knew that she was not qualified to express any of her unhappiness to Oh Ming. Now she was still just a mistress. Yu Lily looked down and nodded. "Yes, she called me today, but I blocked her." Oh Ming was in a good mood when he heard that. He smiled and said, "Well done." Yu Lily felt a little inexplicable. She looked at him and said, "Why don't you ask what happened? What if your fiancé was bullied by me?" Oh Ming chuckled, reached out and rubbed her short hair, and said, "There is no suspense. She will definitely be bullied by you when she meets you. You don't like her. What do you think?" Oh Ming's voice rose slightly at the end, which was indescribably evil. Yu Lily's heart was beating fast. She gently pushed him away, as if she couldn't accept it, and said, "Since you don't like her, why are you still engaged to her?" "My mother arranged it." Oh Ming pulled her aside and continued, "I'm already 31 years old. If I don't get married soon, not only my mother, but even my father will come and urge me to get married. I'm the only son in my family." It was the expected answer, but Lily still felt a little disappointed when she heard it with her own ears. Since it was arranged by his parents, it must mean that Enchanting was a good choice for the O family. It was necessary for them to be of equal status, right? This fiancé was personally chosen by O Ming's mother, but she didn't even know what O Ming's mother looked like. He rubbed her short hair with his big hand and said, "I won't marry her." "Then why did you get engaged to her? Didn't engagement mean they were going to get married?" Chapter 889. Lily felt that O Ming's behavior was too bad. She frowned and said, "Then why don't you break off the engagement? It's not good to drag her down like this." When O Ming heard this, he chuckled and said, "She was the one who wanted to marry me. The reason why she chose me was because I am O Ming. In other words, if O Ming wasn't O Ming, but another man, Enchanting wouldn't even look at him." O Ming glanced at her and said, "This kind of woman, without Enchanting's support, can't even win my mother's favor by herself." "Enchanting?" Lily was shocked and said, "Enchanting? Enchanting, one of the 3 young masters of the capital?" This name could be said to be like thunder piercing the ears. In the capital, who didn't know Enchanting? Just like in Kingstown, everyone knew O Ming and Li Xiqing. Lily had been in the capital for more than 3 years. Enchanting. This name was too familiar. It's him. Enchanting is Enchanting's sister. Lily's eyes widened and she couldn't believe it. If Lily didn't take Enchanting seriously just now she really began to recognize Enchanting's strength. So that's how it is. No wonder O Ming's mother chose Enchanting. This is the real match, isn't it? And I'm just an orphan with no identity, no background, and no power. Deep in Lily's heart, an emotion called inferiority began to spread disobediently. Lily nodded and clearly knew the gap between herself and Enchanting. Lily felt a little sad. She lowered her head and said with a smile, "Let's eat. The food is cold." Lily couldn't hide her thoughts in front of O Ming. O Ming could see the emotions in her heart with just a glance. But he didn't expose her. Hearing Lily's words, he nodded and went to his original seat to sit down. After dinner, O Ming had business to deal with, so he quickly went to the study. Lily washed the dishes and cleaned up the surroundings. After confirming that there was no problem, Lily returned to the room. After saying goodbye to O Ming, Lily went out to pick up the clothes that had been sent for dry cleaning. On the way back, Lily saw a vendor selling DVDs on the side of the road. In big letters, it said, $10 for 3 tickets. Take your pick. Obviously, they were all pirated discs. This kind of small stall owner also had a lot of resources. Lily covered her face with a scarf and quickly stepped forward. She deliberately whispered in Mandarin with a Hong Kong accent, "Boss, do you have spicy dishes?" The boss was also a straightforward person. When he heard this, he raised his eyebrows sensibly and whispered, "That kind is a little more expensive, 15 yuan for 2 tickets. Do you want Japanese, Korean, or European or American? Tell me, I have all of them here." Lily's face was getting hotter and hotter, but she didn't forget to disguise her accent and said, "The spicy touch is expensive, so I'll make it cheaper." "Boss, they are all very expensive. How about this, you buy 2 of the most popular ones, and I will give you an African one." Lily almost knelt down. There is actually someone from Africa. Chapter 890. When she went back, Oh Ming was still busy. Yu Lily blushed and stuffed the DVD into the gap of the sofa. After hanging up the clothes she took back, she went to the room to take a shower. When she was taking a shower, she secretly fantasized about watching that kind of film with Oh Ming. Would she feel something? Wait. What if Oh Ming felt something, but I can't feel it myself? What should I do? I suspect that you have a cold sex. Oh Ming's words in the morning were still ringing in her ears. Yu Lily felt a little embarrassed. In the past, when I secretly watched this kind of film without Oh Ming's knowledge, I could feel it. Now, it should not be too bad, right? However, Oh Ming was still working. If I secretly watched it now, I should not be discovered, right? After taking a shower, Yu Lily sneaked out of the living room in her pajamas. She took out the DVD from the gap of the sofa. Just as she turned on the DVD, she suddenly thought that if Oh Ming suddenly came out, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? Oh my God, that would be too embarrassing. Yu Lily couldn't imagine what Oh Ming's expression would be if he found out that she was secretly watching this kind of film. But Yu Lily was eager to verify whether she had a cold sex or not. Just in case, Yu Lily decided to sneak into the study and harass Oh Ming. When she walked into the study, she found that Oh Ming was not in the study. Quietly sneaking into the room, she heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom in the room. With a sigh of relief, Yu Lily quietly sneaked back into the study. After locking the door of the study, she turned on the computer again. After unpacking the DVD, she put it into the CD of the computer. Soon, the picture came out. Yu Lily inexplicably felt a little nervous. Looking at the somewhat deceptive plot, her lips twitched. After clicking the mouse to fast forward, Yu Lily looked at the screen. Finally, skipping all kinds of plot foreshadowing, Yu Lily directly moved to the part of the exciting scene. She patiently watched the man and woman on the screen kissing, hugging, and making all kinds of ecstasy sounds. Yu Lily watched helplessly as all the foreplay was completed. Finally, it was time for the real show. She watched as the man entered the room, and the woman screamed out in pain and happiness. Yu Lily's eyes widened. Knock! Knock! The door of the study was suddenly knocked, and Yu Lily was shocked. He quickly shouted, "I'm inside." There seemed to be a moment of silence outside. Oh Ming asked, "Why did you lock the door?" Yu Lily found it difficult to speak. She struggled for a moment before saying, "I'm practicing." There was no movement outside, and Yu Lily finally breathed a sigh of relief. His gaze returned to the screen. There was a huge battle going on inside. The process was very long. He was not a second man. Appraisal completed. However, Yu Lily really didn't feel anything at all. Suddenly, the door of the study was opened. As soon as Oh Ming came in, he heard the sound coming from the computer speaker. Yu Lily felt as if she had been caught doing something bad. She was shocked and hurriedly turned off the computer screen. But, the battle in the speakers was still going on. Chapter 891. The headquarters of Eurasian Comics was still a little far from where she lived. The drive took a total of 40 minutes, and with the walking time, it was nearly an hour. It was 9:50 when she arrived at Eurasian Comics. Several people had arrived at the scene for the interview. Presumably, there were not many people to be recruited this time, so there were very few people. After interviewing a few people, Yu Lily's name was called. Yu Lily was wearing the clothes that she bought yesterday. It was very ordinary, but the style was not bad. The company's executives inside had a good impression of this girl. Yu Lily introduced herself, and the executives also looked at her resume. They simply asked a few questions, such as what work she had done, why she left, and her impression of the company, or why she chose this company. Yu Lily answered them one by one and seemed to be at ease. Then, they asked Yu Lily to wait for the notice as usual. As expected, Yu Lily felt that she did a good job, so she was in a good mood. She walked out of Eurasian Comics and looked at the time. It was already past 11 o'clock. She called Oh Ming, and he answered the phone very quickly. Yu Lily didn't even realize that the phone had been connected, and she heard the sound of driving over there. After coming to herself, Yu Lily asked, "Hey, Oh Ming, where are you? I'm going to pick you up." "Where are you?" "I'm now at XX intersection." "Well, stand still, and I'll be there in 5 minutes." After that, Oh Ming hung up the phone. Yu Lily felt a little strange. He actually arrived in 5 minutes. Did Oh Ming know where I was, and then he came here to pick me up? Yu Lily felt a little sweet in her heart, and her lips unconsciously raised. Standing on the side of the road, Yu Lily picked up her lipstick to touch up her makeup. Not long after she put the lipstick away, she heard the sound of a car coming. It was a stretch Lincoln. Oh Ming's car window was down, and Yu Lily clearly saw Oh Ming wearing sunglasses sitting in the car. So handsome. Yu Lily's smile became wider and wider. She opened the door and quickly walked in. "Are you hungry? What do you want to eat?" Oh Ming took off his sunglasses and asked. "I want to eat noodles." "Let's go eat noodles." Yu Lily smiled like a flower. Seeing her smile, Oh Ming was also in a good mood. He put on his sunglasses, started the car, and drove in the direction of a noodle house that Yu Lily used to like. Yu Lily used to be a regular customer, and Oh Ming often came here as well. The manager inside knew Yu Lily. When he saw her, he immediately greeted her and shouted, "Miss Yu, Master O, long time no see. Please come in." Yu Lily and Oh Ming walked into a private room. After ordering, Yu Lily went to the bathroom. There was no bathroom in the private room, but there were several in the noodle house. Yu Lily was a regular here, so she was familiar with the location of the restroom. Now was the peak period, and there were many people coming and going in the restroom. If he went to the nearest restroom, he would definitely have to line up. Yu Lily walked to the end of the corridor, where there were fewer people in the bathroom. Chapter 892. The woman surnamed Yu is here again. I thought she was not in Kingstown. The voice belonged to the manager who had just received Yu Lily. Yu Lily stopped in her tracks. She was in no hurry to open the door. "Ah, that's right. But Oh Ming didn't come here with this woman a while ago. This man is different when he's rich. He has both a fiancée and a mistress. He's so happy." The voice sounded like she was touching up her makeup. "I'm so happy. Isn't that so? But Oh Ming seems to have been with that woman surnamed Yu for a long time. Why is that fiancé still willing to be with him? I heard that the fiancé is also famous in the capital. Needless to say, a man like Oh Ming is rich and handsome. Although he is a bit fickle, he also has the capital to be fickle. If I can keep up with such a man, I would rather marry him. Do you want to go to the toilet?" "No, you go. I'm leaving." Yu Lily heard one of them go next door and the other go out. There was an impulse in his heart to go forward and give all of them a tight slap in the face. However, she couldn't move her feet. Didn't he say that he didn't like the fiancé? Didn't he say that he wouldn't marry Enchanting? Then why did he come to eat noodles with her? And it was a place she liked to come to. She never knew that the service staff here thought of her in this way. Yu Lily, ah. Oh Ming called her surname Yu, which was just a title. But when outsiders called her that, Yu Lily could clearly feel the contempt and disdain in their words. Her heart felt like it was pressed by a stone, and she was depressed. Her throat was choked, and her eyes were hot. She opened her mouth, and the air came in. Yu Lily looked up at the ceiling. What a loser. After a while, the sound of pumping water came from next door. Hearing the sound of high heels going away, Yu Lily stood in the toilet for a long time before she went out. When she washed her hands and walked back to the box, the noodles were already served. Oh Ming turned his head and easily found that Yu Lily's mood seemed to be not quite right. She seemed to be a little depressed than before. What's wrong? Oh Ming asked softly and reached out to pull her. Yu Lily shook her head and smiled. She picked up the chopsticks and said, "Let's eat. I'm starving." Oh Ming looked at her, trying to read something from her face. However, Yu Lily was sitting on the side, eating her noodles with her head down. She didn't look any different from usual. After eating, Oh Ming drove to Kongqing First Chinese Medicine Hospital. After Oh Ming explained the symptoms to the doctor, the old doctor suggested that Yu Lily undergo acupuncture. After he was done with the acupuncture, he took a few pills and walked out with Yu Lily. Oh Ming knew the reason for her coldness, but he didn't tell the doctor. Yu Lily didn't realize why, but she was still a little absent-minded on the way home. His mind was filled with the words of the two waiters. Hugging one in each hand, "I'm so happy. We're here." Oh Ming's voice brought her back to reality. Yu Lily looked up, smiled, and opened the car door. But before she opened the door, Oh Ming held her hand. Oh Ming looked at her and said, "What's wrong with you? You don't seem to be in a good mood this afternoon." Dash. Chapter 893. At least, it was much worse than when he had just picked her up. Yu Lily's back was stiff. She turned her head to look at Oh Ming and smiled gently. Oh Ming's eyes darkened. He reached out to pinch her face and said, "Don't look like that. Smiling is uglier than crying." Yu Lily pouted and touched her cheek that had just been pinched. She lowered her head and asked, "Did I?" "Yes." Oh Ming looked at her with a serious face and said, "What's wrong? Tell me. If I find out that you are lying, I will punish you." Oh Ming pinched her nose intimately and tenderly. Yu Lily's heart skipped a beat. Pursing her lips, she smiled and said, "I just heard something not so good." Oh Ming raised his eyebrows and motioned for her to continue. "And? I heard that you once took Enchanting to that noodle house," Yu Lily said. When Oh Ming heard that, his face darkened and he asked, "Who said that?" "The waiter said that they knew me, you, and Enchanting. I heard it clearly in the toilet. They looked down on me and said that I was your mistress. They thought you were very happy because you had a fiancé and a mistress, and you could hug them on both sides." Yu Lily didn't forget to observe his face as she spoke. When she saw that Oh Ming's expression was getting uglier and uglier, she couldn't help but ask, "Is it true?" Oh Ming's face was not very good, and he explained, "Enchanting also likes to come to this noodle house. Last time my mother specially asked her to come to me and let us have a meal together. Enchanting took me there and told everyone that I was her fiancé." When Yu Lily heard that, she immediately understood. She lowered her head and said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? If I had known that she had been here, I wouldn't have come. It's so annoying. I feel like I'm being stabbed in the back. I forgot." Oh Ming looked at her and seemed to be a little helpless. "I only remember that you liked to eat at this noodle house. How could I remember what that woman did to me?" Besides, it's been almost a year. It's been a long time. Besides, I don't think it's a big deal, so I didn't tell you. Oh. Lily was a little unhappy again. She pouted and looked at Ming. Then, what kind of matter is considered a big deal? Do you know that when I was in the bathroom just now, I almost cried when I heard about it? I thought. What do you think? Ming pinched her face. You're a bad person. If I hadn't seen through you and kept asking you, were you going to keep this secret and live with me? Lily shrank her head and felt a little guilty. As soon as Ming saw her cowardly look, he knew he was right. Ming pinched her face in disappointment. He sighed and said, Enchanting is a European-style young mistress chosen by my mother. This woman is not as beautiful as you, nor is she as sensible as you. It's just that her family background is good. It's a pity that she's already spoiled. I think she'll come looking for you. Yeah, he's already called me once. I can tell that he's very arrogant, but he also sounds like a retard. Chapter 894. Trust. It was a simple word, but when it came to doing it, it wasn't so simple. There was too much between the two of them. Did Lily really believe Ming completely? Not really. But now, she had no other choice, right? Lily heard Ming's words and nodded. She looked at him with a pair of bright eyes and didn't speak. Ming looked at her hair with a little heartache. He reached out and touched her hair. Keep your hair long. You look more beautiful with long hair. Okay. Lily's mood was already a lot better. She leaned over and kissed Ming on the face. You go back to the company. I'll go home to paint. Ming's eyes seemed to be floating, misty and deep. Just when Lily was about to withdraw, his big hands held her, and he lowered his head to kiss her lips. He gently sucked, and his tongue gently pried open her teeth. Lily hugged him with both hands, and the smile on her face widened. She was in a good mood again. Ming's heart was like a mirror. He smiled, held her face, and gently bit her lips. He whispered, in the future, no matter what you hear, you have to tell me the truth. Many things are not as you think. I want to be with you, and I am serious. I don't want to marry Enchanting, and I am not lying. Soon, I will break off the engagement with her and marry you. Ming was a person who valued his promises, and he didn't make promises easily. But once he made a promise, he would keep it. Lily nodded, and her heart warmed. Holding him with both hands, Lily raised her head and kissed his chin again. She said, I will wait for you. I also have to work hard to make money, so that I can be worthy of you. She didn't want to be called a mistress anymore. Never again. Ming's smile froze, and he nodded. He rubbed her short hair and whispered, to be my woman, you don't need to be rich. As long as I like you, that's enough. It just so happens that I like you. I like every part of you. There is no ideal type in the world. It's just that one day, someone suddenly breaks into your world and catches your eye, so he becomes your favorite ideal type. This kind of coincidence is not as simple as a coincidence. Lily burst out laughing. I didn't expect you to have such awareness. Then, she pushed him away and opened the car door. I'm leaving. I'll be waiting for you to come back after I've prepared dinner. Okay. Ming smiled and nodded. Lily got out of the car and looked back every few steps. Soon, she walked into the lobby of the community. After Ming watched her walk in, he started the car and headed back to the company. Unbeknownst to him, a beautiful pink car had been parked outside the neighborhood for a long time. A beautiful woman was sitting inside. She had already seen the intimate interaction between Yu Lily and Oh Ming. The coffee cup in her hand was slightly squeezed. Her slender and fair palm gently rubbed against it. She exerted force without making a sound, causing the coffee cup to be slightly deformed. After the Lincoln limousine drove away, Enchanting got out of her car. He took a step forward and walked to the door. Enchanting was stopped by the security guard at the entrance. "Miss, you don't live here, right?" Chapter 895. When the security guard heard that, he frowned and said, "What's the name of the person you mentioned?" "Oh Ming." Oh Ming's name was like thunder to the ears. The security guard naturally recognized him, but he had never seen Enchanting. The security guard hesitated, took out the pager, called his colleague, and said, Old Lee, check whether the owner of the 28th floor is back. There is a Miss Shen visiting." Yu Lily just got out of the elevator, entered the password, and opened the door, and the doorbell inside kept ringing. It came from the lobby. Yu Lily pressed the answer button, and soon the face of the security guard appeared. "Hello, this is the lobby, and there is a Miss Shen visiting." "Shen." Yu Lily laughed in her heart. Speak of the devil, and he will come. Could it be that this Shen fellow was still monitoring her? However, Yu Lily still pretended not to know her, slightly raised her voice, and said, "Shen. I don't know a friend with the surname Shen. Are you looking for the wrong person?" Hearing that, the security guard looked at Enchanting with a very strange look, and said, "This Miss Shen said that she is Mr. O's fiancée. Are you kidding? If everyone says that she is Oh Ming's fiancée, won't he be busy?" Yu Lily's voice was a little impatient, and she yawned, and her attitude was a little sloppy. "Don't ask me this kind of thing in the future. Just drive her away. That's all. I'm hanging up." As she spoke, Yu Lily hung up the phone. After hanging up, she was secretly happy. Yu Lily almost jumped up, and happily walked into the room. She put the second-hand digital tablet that she bought yesterday on Oh Ming's computer. Opening Photoshop, Yu Lily began to practice drawing with her hands. Being an original IP was far better than being a painter. If it sold well, she might also have the copyright of TV series, games, and so on. In that case, wouldn't she gain both fame and fortune? Yu Lily was painting and daydreaming at the same time, and she was in a very good mood. However, Enchanting's mood was a little bad. After being asked by the security guard with a serious face, her face immediately changed. After returning to the car, Enchanting dialed Oh Ming's number. However, it was not Oh Ming who answered the phone. It was Oh Ming's assistant, Su Cheng. Su Cheng held the phone and said respectfully, "Good afternoon, Miss Shen." Enchanting heard Su Cheng's words and was a little annoyed. She shouted, "Where is Oh Ming?" "Master O is busy. He is currently discussing the contents of the contract with foreign partners. The overseas investment case is white hot. If Miss Shen has nothing important, please don't disturb Master O easily." Su Cheng's attitude was neither cold nor indifferent, but the content expressed was very clear. When Enchanting heard Su Cheng's words, she was so angry that smoke came out of her body. She shouted, "Is this how you talk to your future wife?" Su Cheng secretly sneered in his heart, but his tone was still the same as before. He said, "Miss Shen, Master O is really busy. How about I send you a short video?" Enchanting felt even more annoyed and sneered, "Fine, let's do it." After that, Su Cheng hung up the phone. Then, he used Oh Ming's mobile phone to make a video call to her. Chapter 896. He was really busy. Enchanting was not angry. She snorted coldly and was extremely unhappy. In such a busy situation, he actually went to have dinner with that woman. How important is that? Does Oh Ming like that woman so much? Does he like her so much that he even ignores me, his fiancée? Such an obvious gap made it difficult for Enchanting, who was born with a golden spoon in her mouth and grew up in the palm of her hand, to accept it. Enchanting secretly calculated in her heart and called Oh Ming's mother. It was now afternoon, and Oh Ming's mother picked up the phone for a long time. It sounded like she was taking a nap. As soon as Enchanting picked up the phone, she said sweetly, "Hello, Auntie. It's Manting. What's wrong?" Oh Ming's mother had a cold recently, so when she spoke, her voice was a little nasal. Enchanting could tell that there was something fishy going on. She exclaimed and asked, "Auntie, are you sick?" When Mother O heard this, she smiled and said, "You're such a careful child. I only said one sentence, and you already understood it. As long as it's a person, they can find out. Have you taken your medication? Have you seen a doctor?" Enchanting's caring questions warmed Oh Ming's mother's heart. Oh Ming's mother was quite emotional and said, "It's a small problem. It doesn't matter. That won't do. I'll go to your house to see you. We recently got a new batch of ginseng, which is good for your health. I'll bring you one." Manting, "Thank you, but forget it. Good ginseng is hard to come by." Hearing Oh Ming's mother's words, Enchanting looked at the time. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She smiled and said, "As long as it's for Auntie, it's worth it. Please wait for me. I'll probably be home in the evening." She said home, not your home. Enchanting's tone showed that she regarded the O family as her own home. Oh Ming's mother clearly heard it and asked, "Where are you now?" At the same time, she also looked at the time. It was afternoon. "Come over and have afternoon tea with us." "Are you busy?" "I'm not busy. I'm just in Zhou City. It'll take about 3 to 4 hours to reach Kingstown. Please wait for me." Mother O was moved when she heard that. She said, "Forget it. You'd better get busy first. We'll get together when you're done. It will take 3 or 4 hours to get here." "No, Oh Ming is so busy now, and he can't take good care of you as his son. As his daughter-in-law, I have to make up for this gap. Please wait, I'll make arrangements first." With that, Enchanting hung up the phone. When Mother O heard the busy tone from the other side of the phone, her heart was indescribably moved, and she was even more satisfied with this future daughter-in-law. She then called Oh Ming, but it wasn't Oh Ming who picked up the phone. It was his assistant, Su Qing. "Madam." Su Qing shouted and said, "Master O is in a meeting." "If that's the case, then give me a call after Oh Ming's meeting. I have something important to tell him." Su Qing had an ominous premonition in his heart, but he still respectfully agreed. Oh Ming's meeting lasted more than 2 hours. When it was over, it was already evening. Chapter 897. After the foreign guests left, Su Qing told Oh Ming about the phone call from Oh Ming's mother. After hesitating for a moment, Su Qing said, "In the afternoon, Miss Shen called me. You were in a meeting at that time, so I asked her not to disturb you easily. I think Miss Shen went to talk to Madam about something." Su Qing didn't know much about Miss Shen. But just from the first few contacts, Enchanting was very likely to do such a thing. For example, if she found out Yu Lily's existence, she would complain to Oh Ming's mother. "Well, I see. Go back to your work." Oh Ming took the phone and immediately returned a call to Oh Ming's mother. Oh Ming's mother seemed to be busy. After a long time, she picked up the phone. Hello, Oh Ming. Yes, Mom. Manting came to Kingstown today. Go and pick her up. Oh Ming heard Oh Ming's mother's words and was silent for a moment. He said patiently, Mom, I'm very busy. I don't have time to do such boring things. Besides, isn't she in Kingstown? She came to my company yesterday. Why is she not here today? I heard that she's in Zhou City. It's a little far from Kingstown, Mother O said meaningfully. Although you're busy with work, Manting is your fiancé. You can't be too inconsiderate of her feelings. She heard that I'm sick, so she specially came from Zhou City to see me. Remember to be kind and polite. By the way, I heard that you've arranged a villa for her. That's the right thing to do. Treat her well. Manting is a good girl. I see. Oh Ming was a little impatient. I will send someone over. You don't have to worry so much. I'm busy. Bye. Oh Ming's mother was a little angry. After hanging up the phone, she sighed helplessly. She opened WeChat and sent a message to Shen Manting. I asked my son to pick you up. Shen Manting saw the message and was ecstatic. She replied, Really? That's great. Oh Ming's mother saw the message, smiled, and replied, Really? Shen Manting, thank you, Auntie. Looking at the message on the mobile phone, Shen Manting was a little proud. She had taken care of Oh Ming's mother. It was said that this mistress was an orphan. Let's see how she would deal with her. It took you Lily 2 hours to finish a character. The man in the manga had a straight nose, a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes, and a beautiful mole under his left eye. His hairstyle was the most trendy design that accentuated his facial features. He was dressed in a burgundy suit, tall and slender. He squinted his eyes and looked forward. He held onto his loosened tie with one hand and squinted forward. His other hand was tucked into his trouser pocket. He was tall and slender. So handsome. Yu Lily's drawing style was different from that of ordinary comics. The characters' appearances and costumes were more delicate. She didn't deliberately outline their facial features. But, after all, she was based on Oh Ming, so you could more or less see his shadow. With a satisfied smile, Yu Lily saved the character. The design of the male lead had been completed. All that was left was the design of the female lead. Yu Lily used the mobile phone to look at herself and smiled gently. Then, he started to draw on the digital tablet. Most of the female protagonists in comics were long-haired beauties. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.